Hey, everybody. Hey, welcome to this latest episode of Movies America. Spoiler warning. As always, I'm your humble host, Van Ebert. And this is going to be a Gran Turismo episode of Movies America. Spoiler warning, where I am going to spoil you rotten because we have all kinds of spoiler-filled facts and discussion and all that going on all about Gran Turismo here. But even better than that here, everybody, we have got a very, very special guest. Yes, it is Edward Havens from the 80s Movie Podcast. Yes, from the entertainment capital of the world, Hollywood, LA. Okay, so you've got that to look forward here to after the intro. Okay, and hey, everybody, get your questions ready for Edward. He is an encyclopedia of 80s movie knowledge. Okay, so he has forgotten more in I don't know how long than you will ever know. Okay, so that's what we call a tease, everybody. Okay, and hey, get in the live chat here in Rumble and YouTube. And if you live chat in YouTube, I can put your comment up on the screen. All right, everybody. So hey, you know what? Without further ado, why delay? Let me give you something to dance to.
In a world where the number of movies available is great, but many are so bad, you'll learn a new definition of hate. One man sifts and reviews through the movie sludge. One man will be the movie cop, jury, and judge. He goes by many names, but you know him by Movies America.
That's right, everybody. That's right. Welcome, my movie maniacs, my freedom-fueled film fanatics. There's one right there. And then, hey, well, that was Willem Dafoe. And he might come up here in tonight's episode. He thinks he might there for a specific reason, okay? And, hey, you know what? Why wait any further here? Like I had mentioned before the intro, we have a special treat for us all tonight, okay? So get ready to be excited because we have Edward Havens from the 80s Movie Podcast with us tonight. And he is, he's been kind enough to join me here for your pleasure as well as mine, so we can ask him some questions, get some good 80s movie discussion going on. Because, man, I tell you, there's nothing more I love, or one of the things I love the most is 80s movie discussion. Probably so much it probably disgusts the average person, except Edward. Okay, because Edward is not the average person. Okay, he probably talks. Well, I know he talks just as much about 80s movies as I do, so a lot more, obviously. So Edward Havens, he knows a thing or two about movies, just to give you a heads up as far as who Edward is. After a 34-year career in the movie business that included stints managing movie theaters as director of acquisitions and co-writer of Tales from the Crapper for the legendary B-movie company Trauma Films, film critic and reporter for his own website, filmjerk.com, and as an assistant director on a number of feature films and student shorts. Edward started the 80s Movie Podcast in 2019 to share his passion and knowledge of movies. Entering his 5th year as a podcaster, Edward's show has seen incredible growth over the past year, including having been chosen as Samsung Free's Podcast of the Day this past Thanksgiving Day, the first day the app became publicly available. Okay, so pretty impressive credentials right there. And and then also you can go to the 80s Movie Podcast.com and you can check out his episodes there. And also, I believe he's on Apple Podcasts as well. Okay, but hey, let's not keep the man waiting any longer. Okay. Get ready to give it up for Edward Havens from the 80s Movie Podcast. Let's get him on in here, everybody.
Good evening, Van.
Hey, good evening, Edward. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. And the person who wrote that introduction must be a very stable genius.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I mean, that's just reeks of stability. It just drips off of every word in that. So,
yeah. And you'll also have to forgive me. I have I have a special co-host with me tonight.
Oh, excellent.
This is Buffy. She's I'm actually in her room right now.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, Buffy. So, yeah, just got done slaying vampires, no doubt, right?
Yeah, that's actually where she's named.
So there we go. I tell you, I think we're in sync right there. But yeah, again, thanks for joining us here. I think that everyone's lives are enriched by more 80s movie, knowledge and that kind of thing. And we're hoping to get that from you here tonight. And just right off the bat here, I have to say, I just love how you provide this illuminating commentary about like some of my favorite 80s movies. I mean, I really appreciate like the deep dives that you do, and you hear about things about like how a specific actor is supposed to get a role, or a director was supposed to direct a particular movie. I think in a recent episode, you're talking about how Steven Spielberg was supposed to direct Rain Man at one point.
There was a period of about 2 years where Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise were trying to get Rain Man made. And the list of directors, and I'm going to save the whole list for my eventual episode on Rain Man, but amongst the many directors, Sidney Pollack, who directed 3 Days of the Condor and Tootsie, amongst many films.
The Firm.
He won an Academy Award for directing and producing Out of Africa in 1985. He was supposed to direct, and then he left the project for some reason. Steven Spielberg came on for a while. He left the project, and eventually Barry Levinson, who also won an Oscar for directing Rain Man, came aboard, and the movie went from being pretty much dead in the water to an Academy Award-winning film in about 15 months.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so because it was literally just one thing that these two actors, they just wanted to work together, and they wanted to work together so bad that they were willing to take a great reduced payment of their services to make sure the film gets made. They wanted to make sure they made it with a top quality director, and Barry Levinson very much was a top quality director, having just come off of Good Morning Vietnam,
right,
and being Oscar nominated for writing Diner back in 1982. Yeah. So it was just one of those things that it came together the right way at the right time. Could Spielberg have made a better movie or as good of a movie? Hard to tell, because he wasn't really known for that kind of mix of comedy and drama in the 80s. He was much more of a big spectacle guy, whether it was fantasy, action, or science fiction, or even Empire of the Sun and Color Purple. He did things big. And Rain Man's definitely not a big movie. It's a very intimate, small movie, even though it takes place mostly as a cross-country road trip. It's a very compact and insular movie. So I'm not sure Steven Spielberg would have been the right director for the movie anyway, as much as I love Spielberg.
Yeah, it's like, because I mean, the closest movie I can think of to that, and this isn't even really that close, like, I don't know, Always, or because that's not really even that close either, because that's a big movie with Forest Fires and Richard Dreyfuss, and I can't even put my finger on any movie that he.
I mean, you've got Audrey Hepburn playing God, essentially. You can't get much bigger than that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then we probably wouldn't have got that Hans Zimmer soundtrack from Rain Man. We would have John Williams most in doubt, or undoubtedly with that. So that would have been interesting. Yeah,
it was just a movie that it got made at the right time with the right people. And as much as I love Sidney Pollack, he was a fantastic filmmaker for many years. Could do a wide variety of genres and tones, but Barry Levinson was the right guy, and obviously the film was a huge success. We played at my theater. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time, and back in 1988, 89, it was not unusual for a movie to play 3 or 4 months, and I think we played Rain Man, which was especially unusual for the time.
Right, absolutely. So I remember seeing that, and I was like, I right after I saw it, I was like, I got to tell as many people as I possibly can about this, but I have to try to describe it in a way that entices them to go see it, because when you think of the plot, when you're trying to describe the plot, like, okay, well, there's this brother, and he finds out that his dad died, and then he has to go to his inquest or will reading or whatever. And then right then and there, people are probably falling asleep at my description, you know, and then like, oh, then he finds out he has a brother he didn't know about. He's an older brother. He's
autistic, which we, and back then we didn't even have autism. Autism wasn't really a part of the, vocabulary. They were still, using other words that are deemed offensive today in order to describe them. So it was a movie that kind of helped move the autism discussion along in a more positive manner than if you go back to Tropic Thunder, full retard. Even though that came out much later, but that just it just helped move the discussion along in a more positive manner and present people who are different from most people in a better light. So
you bet.
And then watching Dustin Hoffman give his award speech when he won the Academy Award for playing Rain Man, where he kind of fell back into the tropes of the character while giving his speech, because even though he'd won like every freaking award that season, he was still in shock that he had won. And he even forgot to thank Tom Cruise and Barry Levinson in his speech, like the two people. And so, it's just such a beautiful movie. And it's something that it doesn't really matter what your background is. You can find a connection to it in some way.
Right.
And I've watched it about a year or so ago. It's 35 years old and it still holds up very well.
Oh, most definitely.
Not a lot of 80 movies hold up very well.
Not at all, yeah. And they had such, great chemistry there as well. I mean, even with Dustin Hoffman playing such an interesting character there. I mean, one has, I don't know if you'd call it special needs. I'm just going to say he's autistic, and then one is non-autistic, I guess is the most basic way I can put it. But they still have that brother. They can portray that brotherly chemistry, kind of like in the scene where they're in the hotel and Valeria Golino is still there. Mm-hmm. And I think Tom Cruise says something about, hey, was I mean to you, Raymond? Yeah. And then they like, shut up. It's just like that kind of rhythm that they have going on. It's like brothers fighting.
Right.
And I was like, that was perfect. I mean, obviously it's all scripted, and they obviously do rehearsals and that kind of thing. But it really, just to the layman watching that movie, I was like, wow, that is just some great chemistry, simulated chemistry between brothers.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the wonderful things about working at movie theaters, which I did until the pandemic shut it all down in 2020, is that if you really loved a movie and you had the ability, because now, movies don't last more than 5 or 6 weeks in theaters.
Yeah.
But back then you could, figure out the timing based on when the movie was starting. It's like you knew when a particular scene was coming up because you'd played it so many times over the course of months. So you could go into the theater and watch like the nuances of individual scenes, which I think for me as a young adult kind of helped me appreciate filmmaking even more, because you have the ability to just knuckle down on specific things and notice lighting, notice sound effects, notice the props, and it's just a fascinating way where you really can learn filmmaking from a perspective of watching things over and over again, which is ironically how Quentin Tarantino and a lot of the 90s and 2000s directors did. They watched movies over and over and over again on home video.
Sure.
That's because they were working in the video stores, and they were able to pick up some of the things from watching them multiple times, many, many times on video. So, the education that I got from films in the 80s is kind of the same education that a lot of the same people did who ended up making movies, but getting it from the video store instead of movie screens.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's a little quicker to watch the movies in a video store there, and Tarantino was doing that. And then, I think Roger Avery, would come over and visit him. And
they were coworkers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. They were. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, their podcast, Video Archives, is named after the video store that they worked at.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I thought, I knew the name of the podcast. Like, where have I heard that before?
Yeah.
And then he's always advertising. He's the owner of the Beverly?
The New Beverly.
The New Beverly. That's it. The New Beverly. Yep.
New Beverly Cinema, which is one of my favorite theaters.
Yeah.
And and the funny part is, one of the theaters I used to manage was about a mile and a half away on the same street, and it was at a mall called the Beverly Center.
Okay.
So we were the Beverly Center cinemas, and they were the New Beverly Cinema. And we played the first run movies, 70 millimeter, 6-track Dolby Stereo, big movies. In the early 90s, we tested the DTS digital sound system for a full year before it became available on Jurassic Park in June of 93. So if you were at the Beverly Center in the fall of 92 through the spring of 93 and saw any Universal movie, you saw it in digital at my theater before you even knew that digital sound existed.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So why is it the New Beverly then? Did they tear something down or?
No, it was just the name that they took. There was another theater many years earlier called the Beverly Theater in Beverly Hills. And then the New Beverly was I forget the name of the original theater when it was built in the 40s. For a while, it was a supper theater, a live theater that ran live shows while people ate dinner. For a while, it was a porno house, and then I think his name was either Torgel or Torgelson. I don't remember, but a gentleman bought it in the late 70s, and he renamed it the New Beverly in order to separate itself from its porn past. And he's the one who instituted the double features of older movies, changing the schedule 3 times a week.
Okay.
And it was a place where people like Quentin Tarantino started watching older movies on a big screen. So when he died, and he got hit by a car while he was riding his bike, and he died, I want to say in 2007 or 2008. And because Tarantino was one of the biggest supporters of the theater, he actually ended up buying the theater. And they don't have a digital projector. They're one of the very few theaters that still run exclusively film. And many of the films that they show are from Tarantino's personal movie collection of 35 millimeter prints.
Very cool.
And then on weekends, you can usually see midnight shows of one of his movies like Kill Bill or Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction. On Sundays and Wednesday matinees, he plays like kids movies. And it's just a special place to go to the films. And I wish I could go more often, but it's like 25 miles from where I live currently in Long Beach.
Oh, okay.
So I don't get to go as often as I want. And plus, his shows, the way that he curates the theater is so unique, even amongst revival and repertory houses, that he regularly sells out every single show, every single night, no matter what he's playing.
Wow.
And he, a few months ago, one of the movies that they programmed was a Jackie Chan double feature of the original Hong Kong versions of Rumble in the Bronx, and I forget the second movie. But the only time that you could have seen like the original Hong Kong version of Rumble in the Bronx when it came out in 1995 was either to go to Hong Kong, or if you were lucky enough, like we were here in Los Angeles, we had specialty theaters that were catering to Asian films. So I drove all the way up to Alhambra, which is a good 25, 30 miles outside of Los Angeles, at a little theater called the Kwo Wah, in order to see the original Asian version of Rumble in the Bronx, which is like 20 minutes longer. There's entire subplots that got cut out when it finally came out in America like 2 years later.
Wow.
But that's the kind of thing that he's doing at this theater. And I wish that more theaters around the country were doing these types of things, because unfortunately, with like streaming right now, I was doing a little thing. Yeah, I remember when Disney Plus came out a couple of years ago, and they said every Disney movie is going to be available from day one. And then they didn't have Song of the South because of obvious reasons.
Sure.
For some reason, they never had Condor Man, even though you can rent Condor Man on a number of other streaming services.
Oh yeah.
So I did a search last week for an episode I'm going to do in the future about streaming. Of the 28 movies that Disney released in the 80s, whether it was kids movies or animated movies, 60% of them are available on Disney Plus for free. 35% of them are available to rent on other services, but are not available on Disney. And then there are 2 movies that you cannot get in any format anymore. Like the last time they came out was like on DVD in 1999, which was The Watcher in the Woods with Betty Davis and Lynn Holly Johnson, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, a Ray Bradbury adaptation
Oh yeah,
with Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah,
You cannot get it anywhere.
yeah. Jason Robards.
Yeah, and Jason Robart. It's
Yeah.
not. There's no place you can see it online. There's no place you can rent it on video. It basically, these movies do not exist anymore, and that's a big that's one of the reasons I'm doing this show, is because I want to be able to bring back things that people who are my age, might have forgotten over the years, and then people who are younger than us may never even heard of. Because I know I saw Something Wicked This Way Comes in theaters in 1983, and if I knew that 40 years later it would be completely unavailable in any way, shape, or form, I might have bought it back in 98 or whenever, when it actually was available. There's a lot of media, a lot of movies that have completely disappeared for one reason or another, whether it's rights issues or music issues or whatever.
Yeah.
That, if I want to introduce my kid to Something Wicked This Way Comes, I'm going to either have to dark web it and download it illegally. And is it really illegal if the copyright holder is not enforcing the copyright by making it available?
Right. Yeah.
Which brings up interesting questions. You'll see a lot of esteemed critics today, like Matt Zoller-Seitz from RogerEbert.com, who are not quite advocating, going out and finding these movies by any means necessary if companies are not making them available, because that's the whole point of a movie. A movie is meant to be seen. Period.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get business out of the way. Let people's creations get out there, so people's eyeballs can check them out. And Something Wicked This Way Comes. I mean, I was surprised. I mean, when I saw it, I was, I think, a junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that, I thought it was creepy for a Disney movie. I was surprised that this is a Disney movie, and Jonathan Pryce playing Mr. Dark, and you got the scary, festival. I forget what it was called, coming to town. And there's I think they like the visual effects. Didn't they enlist Industrial Light and Magic?
Yeah, they did. It was a top-notch production.
Yeah,
it was one of the few films that in the 80s that Pam Grier was a star of a major Hollywood movie, because she was, pretty much being stuck in B movies. And now here's this A-list movie with major stars from a Hollywood studio that she had a major part in.
Yeah.
And because it flopped, because people didn't know how to react to it at the time, because it's a Disney movie, but it's not a kid's movie.
Right.
That now, 40 years later, even though we're way past that, we take, kids. I go to see a Marvel movie and that is much more violent than and scary in many ways than Something Wicked This Way Comes, from Disney, no less. That people are taking their 5-year-olds to.
Yeah. Right.
And even though it's rated PG-13, they have no problems taking their 5-year-old kids to. We're past the point of where we were in 1983 in terms of what Disney is able to bring to the market. So, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why. It doesn't seem to be a rights issue. It doesn't seem to be a music licensing issue, which a lot of the great television shows before 1999 aren't available. You like, for example, Moonlighting with Bruce Willis. You can't get it. You can't find it anywhere online, because there's a problem with all the music that they used over the years on the show, with whether it was the musical episode in 1987, or just regular pop music that was around at the time, where streaming and didn't exist in 1985. The concept of streaming was like I don't know if anybody had even thought that you'd be sitting in front of a computer at your house streaming entertainment onto your phone or your computer.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if it doesn't Miami Vice have the same problem with all the music that they had in there?
I believe they solved it. I think Miami Vice came out on Blu-ray a few years ago, but I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, or I think it's on like a Nick at Night or something like that. It's something on some channel.
It's not as like Moonlighting is one of the big ones in terms of the top 80s television shows, which you just can't find, which is the same thing. It's because of some obscure rights issue that is going to be too costly for them to clear. But the music is essential to those episodes because the scripts were written around specific songs.
Right.
If you watch, if you watch Freaks and Geeks now on DVD or Blu-ray or on streaming, they couldn't clear all the music rights, so they got like sound-alike songs or instrumental karaoke like versions of those songs.
Yeah.
And you're not really watching the episodes as they originally ran on NBC.
Sure.
23 years ago. They were able to clear as many songs as they could, but there were some people who own the rights to those songs were like, we want X, and I'm sorry, we can't afford that. Well, then you can't have the song, even though you once had it.
So, How about me naive? Don't they have like an option to, own the song forever for the episode?
No, because when these contracts are written, they're written in terms of what is available at the time. When Moonlighting was around, we had cable television. There was only a few cable channels, and we had VHS tapes, but DVDs didn't exist yet. Blu-rays didn't exist yet. Streaming didn't exist yet. Video on demand didn't really exist yet in terms of the way, or AVOD or all these things that exist now that didn't exist 40 years ago. Sure. And so every time there's a new format, you didn't previously negotiate those rights, like in perpetuity, you have to renegotiate those rights.
Yeah.
Which was also one of the things that we dealt with at Troma when I was there in the mid 2000s, where some of these movies that Troma released very successfully, they kind of gave up on, they kind of let the rights go. They, some of the movies, when they bought the rights, they only bought the rights for 10 years or 20 years. Because back then, movies didn't have as long of a shelf life as they do now.
Sure.
And so a lot of the B movies that they had released in the 80s and 90s are now owned by other companies because they let the rights lapse for whatever reasons. They didn't make enough money for them originally to spend more money and try to then, renegotiate DVD or Blu-ray rights or streaming rights, YouTube rights, whatever. So
yeah,
that's why today, most of the movies that you see from the 80s that are coming out on home video or on streaming are the most popular ones, the ones that everybody knows, because those are the ones that continue to make money for the studios. But when you get down to the smaller studios and the independents that no longer exist, it becomes complicated. All I'm working on a series right now about Miramax films.
Sure,
in the 80s.
Yeah,
they didn't become the powerhouse they became until the 90s with Pulp Fiction and the movies of Kevin Smith and all this stuff. But back in the 80s, they were a small independent company. Some of the movies they, got in perpetuity, and some of the movies they only got for a short amount of time. So finding out who owns the rights to these movies now, because Miramax got bought by Disney, then Disney sold it to a private equity fund, who then sold parts of Miramax to one company and then sold parts of it to Fox, which is now owned by Disney.
Right.
So finding out who owns some of these more obscure titles. I mean, we know who owns the Quentin Tarantino movies from Miramax. We know who owns the Robert Rodriguez movies from Miramax, because those are the big movies that still draw attention. But trying to figure out who owns Working Girls, or I've Heard the Mermaid Singing, movies that are not American movies, or there were very small independent productions that did a little bit of business in the 80s, and they're kind of out of circulation now. So
yeah,
even if you were around in the 80s, you might not have heard of these movies because they didn't get outside of the big cities.
Right. Yeah. Well, one movie that comes to mind about that is like Ransom with Mel Gibson. And for a long time, I could not find that. Definitely not on streaming. I mean, you could get it all on hard copy, and I finally did have to, take the plunge and just buy it on hard copy. I can't believe I didn't have that because I love that movie. But yeah, try to get on Prime Video, try to get on Hulu, try to get on Netflix, and try to find a Ransom on that. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, with Ransom and a lot of those are Disney produced movies that are rated R. That if it's not going to be on Disney Plus, well, Disney also owns Hulu. Why is it not on Hulu?
Right.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that and that's a more recent movie. That was like 96.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Mel Gibson movie. Mel Gibson, yeah, we have problems with Mel Gibson today, but the movie
separate the art from the artist.
The movie is still a banger.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Ron Howard directed. So
Ron Howard did a fantastic job. Rene Russo was great, but
Lieutenant Dan's a bad guy.
Huh?
Lieutenant Dan is a bad guy.
I mean, it's just like, but why that? But that's what's happening in our media landscape, where even movies that were big hits have started to disappear after only 1 or 2 generations, because honestly, I don't know. I saw one thing today. It was talking about the success of Suits on streaming now, where the writers of Suits, which was created 15 years ago, they're not getting paid very much because of the way that streaming contracts for the writers were negotiated with several years ago. That's why the writers are on strike now, is because they want more accountability. They want more. They want to see how the numbers are, and they want to get paid for their work. It's like if Amazon is making all this money off of Suits streaming now after 15 years, the actors are not the only people who, the actors have a contract with the Producers Guild and the writers, and then the directors. All these different guilds have all these different contracts where they're all getting different things, and that's one of the reasons the writers have been on strike for 2.5 months, is because they want fair and adequate compensation for the work that they did, even if that work was 15 years ago, but has come back into the zeitgeist for whatever reason.
So so it seems like, every single time you're going to have like a new medium in which you can watch creation, creative projects, whatever. Seems like you're going to always have to renegotiate for that, because I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of mode that you're going to watch entertainment on in 20, 25, 30 years from now. We can't even think of. It seems like they're going to have to go back to the negotiating table and go, hey, you can watch Die Hard on this, whatever new thing this is in 30 years. And it's going to be right back to the negotiating table. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that sounds like that's the way it's going to go.
Well, a lot of it, the studio stuff, like, for example, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Indiana Jones movies, they were produced by Lucasfilm and released by Paramount. But now that now that Lucasfilm is owned by Disney, the new Indiana Jones movie that just came out this summer was released by Disney, because they own the rights to the characters, and they actually had to pay Paramount like a part of the money from the movies in order to be able to distribute it, even though they owned all of the characters and they owned the film series through their buying of Lucasfilm.
Oh, right.
But they still had to share some of it with Paramount, because Paramount technically still had the rights to the original movies.
Yeah, because I think it's the first Indiana Jones movie didn't have the Paramount Mountain at the beginning of it. So
it did. The first Indiana Jones, the first Raiders, had the Paramount logo and then went into the mountain.
Right.
And then and that was like a streaming thing. And then now the new movie, they can't do that because it's a Disney movie, or they could have found some interesting way to work it.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had the gopher or the prairie dog coming out. So yeah.
And so, but that's one of those things that you lose, or with the Disney Star Wars movies, where you lose that 20th Century Fox fanfare.
Yeah.
And now Disney owns 20th Century. They don't own Fox, but they own the movies that Fox made up until a certain point. So, but now they could technically go back and put that 20th Century Studios fanfare, because they actually own that bum 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 bum. They can actually go back. They can actually go back and put those into the sequel trilogy if they wanted.
Yep. But
they haven't. And it's just like, but for me, growing up in the 70s and 80s, that's a part of Star Wars. That 20th century logo, the fanfare, where it says a long time ago in a galaxy far away,
Far away. Yep.
over the 20th Century Fox fanfare. It's like, that's a part of Star Wars tradition. And now that you own all these components, how hard would it be to just add those 4 seconds of the intro to the Star Wars movies? That would be fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to appeal to the sentimentality of the audience right there. Yeah. It kind of reminded me of like Quentin Tarantino, how, at least for some of his movies, he'd always have that, like the 70s kind of coming attractions or coming soon stuff right there. I love that when, that like the Grindhouse films definitely did that. So,
yeah. Or when he did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he actually used the Paramount logo from the time frame the movie is set in. And that and for people like me, who I was born in 67, grew up on movies of the 70s and 80s. And so seeing little touches like that just make it that much more special, and know that he cares that much about film in general. And so my favorite Tarantino movies are the ones where he directly addresses or indirectly addresses Hollywood folklore through his movies, whether it's things like the Paramount logo or the use of music tied to a specific memory from another movie. It's just the way that he weaves everything together is sometimes magic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I like how with Joker, a few years ago they used like the 1970s era Warner Brothers logo at the beginning of it right there, and it's like I thought it was really cool because that seems like that movie is set in the 70s or early 80s or whenever.
Yeah, it's set in a weird time frame, and then you have Robert De Niro as the talk show host who has to deal with a guest coming on, against the host's will, which is a callback also to Scorsese and De Niro's King of Comedy in 1983. And some people don't know that Scorsese was actually originally supposed to direct Joker.
Oh, okay.
He back about 10, 12 years ago, when Joker was first being developed, Scorsese was the director of record, and then he left the project to go work on, I think, Silence.
Okay.
And
wow.
So
totally
if you watch the movie, it still got his credit, produced by Martin Scorsese, in part because he was the one who helped to develop the movie, and so he's the one who actually started putting in those Scorsese touches.
Sure.
Because it was going to be a Scorsese movie, and recalling several Scorsese movies, including The King of Comedy from 1983. So
Taxi Driver,
Taxi Driver,
Yep.
And so that's why you see all those little Scorsese flares in it, because at one time it was going to be his.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
imagine
rolling around New York City, it's looking all crappy like it did in Taxi Driver.
Imagine the discussion on Twitter if Scorsese had directed a anti-superhero movie.
Yeah, because he's a big fan of superhero movies, as we all know. So yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about To Live and Die in L.A. I mean, I just loved your episode about that. I'm
Thank you.
Jealous that you got to see it in theaters, my man.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I graduated in 1985. I was the film critic for my school newspaper, which was a position that didn't exist until I literally willed it into existence. And one of the things that I was able to do was able to start getting studios to send us press kits. And one of the press kits I got like the week before I graduated high school in June of 85 was the press kit for To Live and Die in LA.
Ooh.
So, and it wasn't coming out until like October, but that's how early they sent press kits out back then. So I had spent the summer like just reading, and it had 8x10 glossy black and white photos from images from the movie, and it had a whole 40-page write-up about the movie and about the career of the director William Friedkin and all this stuff. And then when I saw the movie, I got to see it in Los Angeles. I forget if it was the Chinese. It was a theater in Hollywood. I remember that much, on a humongous screen. And then I'm starting to see things that I know specifically, like the car chase scene. I talk about it a little bit on my episode. The car chase scene is filmed on a very rarely used freeway that borders Long Beach and Wilmington, with Wilmington's where all the harbors or the ports of Long Beach and the ports of Los Angeles.
San Pedro, is that where that's at?
It's between San Pedro and, if this is Long Beach and this is San Pedro, Wilmington is in the center. Okay. So the bridge that he jumps off of at the start of the movie is the Vincent Thomas Bridge, which also Robert De Niro mentions in Heat, although he calls it the St. Vincent Thomas Bridge. Thomas Vincent was not a saint.
Isn't that unfortunately the bridge that Tony Scott committed suicide?
That's the same bridge that Tony Scott jumped to his death from. It's also, if you watch the Monkees movie Head, the first few minutes of the movie that includes Mickey Dolenz jumping off of the bridge. This bridge is used in a lot of movies.
Right.
And then the car chase scene, I'd driven that stretch of freeway 100 times. And I'm watching the movie and it's like, they're on the wrong side of the road. But and then learning, years later of why Friedkin did it is because, he had better light on, this side of the freeway, even though traffic goes this way on this side. He had it reversed because the lighting would be better for the longer, so he could shoot more of the scene, because he only had the bridge for that stretch of road for 2 weekends. So he had to make the most of what he was able to shoot. And you watch that, and it's as exciting as any car chase scene that's ever been seen in the movie.
Oh, most definitely.
And then you have those performances, and here we go, Willem Dafoe.
Yep. There you go. Willem Dafoe.
This
Rick
is
Masters.
where a lot of people got their first. Willem Dafoe was in Streets of Fire and lots of other little movies, but this was like Willem Dafoe's first big movie as a co-star, which of course then led to Platoon and having the career that we all know today.
Right.
But what was wonderful about his performance was that because Willem Dafoe was so little known at the time, he was truly terrifying as a bad guy, because you didn't have this baggage attached to him.
Yep.
And that's what made him truly scary. Or if you remember him from Streets of Fire, where he was also, one of the other bad guys.
Yeah.
But that's what made him so special. Then you turn around and see him as Sergeant Elias in Platoon, where he's really the good guy, or one of the good
absolutely.
guys. Just see that complete reversal. But you know him as this bad guy from To Live and Die in LA, and then you see him in Platoon, and it's such a shifting character. But at the start, you don't know where he stands yet of Platoon. And so you have your baggage of him from these other movies where, he's usually the bad guy.
Right.
So it's just one of those things where To Live and Die in LA was just, Friedkin was in a low point of his career at that point. And it was a movie that nobody really expected much from. And to be completely honest, it didn't even really do that great at the box office. It wasn't until cable and home video where it really found its audience. And now it's one of the more revered movies of the decade. But it's, again, one of those things where if it wasn't for people's love of the movie years ago, it probably would be forgotten by now.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that big of a hit.
Yeah.
So,
how many people have woken up in the middle of the night and it's been on HBO and like, what is this movie? This car chase is awesome. What is this? And then they discover it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, back in the 60s and 70s, there were so many movies about car chases. And I'm setting you up for your next movie, the movie you're going to be talking about. But and then the 80s, outside, by the time you got to the 80s, car chase movies were kind of gone, or they were turned into comedies like Six Pack and with Kenny Rogers and
Blues Brothers.
There weren't a whole lot of great car movies in the 80s, and then. And so now with Gran Turismo, I think that it wasn't 17 million isn't a number to sneeze at, but it's one of those movies that it probably hit number one because there's been a dearth of good car movies recently for years. And it's just, whenever there's a kid's movie that's released after 3 months, they'd be like, oh, the market's been starving for a kid's movie. And it's like, well, I think the car fans haven't had a good car chase movie, outside of, the Fast and Furious movies are no longer about car chases. It's about, driving in space or jumping, they're no longer car movies.
Right. Yeah. Jumping out of cargo planes and stuff.
So that's why the first Fast and Furious was a big hit, is because back then there weren't a whole lot of good car chase movies. Gone in 60 Seconds, the one with the Nicolas Cage, did as well as it did because by the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an absence of good car chase movies, where even a decent one like Gone in 60 Seconds, which I don't know if you've ever seen the original Gone in 60 Seconds from the early 70s.
I haven't. No, is Steve McQueen? Is that who was in that?
No. And
it's Bullet, but
that's Bullet. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Gone in 60 Seconds, and maybe I'll leave you with this. It was written, produced, directed, and starring and distributed by a guy named H.B. Halicki. He owned a garage, an auto garage in Gardena, and he always wanted to be a filmmaker. So in 1972, he kind of took stock of what he had available to him, his friends who were, car guys like, on the racing scene, and he kind of wrote a script, and it was based around all the cars that he had available to him. And the reason I have a specific affinity for the original Gone in 60 Seconds is because I'm in it.
Excellent. Really?
There's a scene very early in the movie where the guys are planning their the heist of the cars. It's they got to steal 50 cars over a period of time, and so the guys who are going to be stealing up, and Main Drain Drake, the main character, the Nicolas Cage character in the remake, he's got to make these plans, and he's talking with a friend as they're walking in the park. So there's an establishing shot after a wedding scene, and my mom plays the bride because she was actually dating Toby, the writer, producer, director, star, and eventually distributor at the time. So that's where my love of movies came, was seeing this movie made when I was 5 years old. So we're in a park in north of downtown Los Angeles, and Toby was literally like, "Get over there, play with those girls. I'm going to shoot you." and basically he just kind of created this establishing shot.
Sure.
While I was on the set with my, visiting him with my mom.
Like, here's my contract.
Yeah. So if you ever watch it, after the wedding scene, there's a little kid wearing a Rams beanie and a Rams jacket, blue and gold.
Excellent.
And he's being chased by a couple of girls, and that's me when I was 5 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But it's one of the movies that kind of revitalized the car movies in the 70s. If you watch Smoking the Bandit and Hooper and a lot of those Burt Reynolds movies, you can kind of see the influences from the original Gone in 60 Seconds in it. And so, but by the time the remake came out in 2000, when was the last time you had seen a good car movie in the 90s?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Ronin's the only one I can think of, but that would be like the only one I could think of.
Yeah.
But,
and then that was like 2 or 3 years before that.
Yeah.
And Ronin wasn't a great movie, but man, Frankenheimer knew how to direct car movies.
Yeah, he did.
And so, and that's like the BMW chase scenes series with Clive Owen that premiered on the internet in the early 2000s. It was a big hit, because you had top directors like John Woo and Guy Ritchie and John Frankenheimer directing these basically 8-minute commercials for BMW cars, where Clive Owen's the driver and he's doing all these crazy stunts in these cars.
Sure.
Because at that time, car movies weren't in vogue, and so the people who love cars and love car chases and love car movies, they ate it up, and that's why I think that Gran Turismo was number one this weekend, because people want that. The Fast and Furious movies, they don't want all of this. Oh, they're being chased by a sub in the Antarctic or the Arctic, or I haven't even seen the last 5 or 6 of them, because after they started dragging a safe down the streets of Rio in Fast 5, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. This isn't a car chase. These aren't car movies anymore.
Yeah. You kind of have to make peace with like turning your brain off. I mean, not that the first 3 or 4 were Paul Thomas Anderson movies either, but I mean, the more recent ones, it's almost like, do you have that personality, or do you have that affinity for movies where you just want to have some big dumb fun?
Yeah.
Where you want to turn off your brain? Because I mean, I'm definitely not that guy that watches, Furious 9 and goes, wow, I'm ready for some revolutionary cinematic renaissance right here. No, I want to see things go and get smashed up real good. That's why I watch it.
I've actually got like the 8th Fast and Furious movie in my Movies Everywhere account. I got it for free. I don't even remember how I got it. And I still haven't watched it after like 5 years because it just doesn't hold any interest anymore because
Right.
the last few movies I saw took this great idea and started swerving
Right.
way outside of its lane. And it's like, these are fun movies. The first couple were fun movies
Yeah. Yeah.
where, yeah, they didn't have much of a plot. The new movies don't have much of a plot either, but at least they were fun car movies that
Yeah.
kind of really
Yeah.
got into the nitty gritty of that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no stakes to those movies either. Like
Yeah.
like To Live and Die in LA had plenty of stakes right there. And that's one thing that I liked about that here. Not to keep coming back to Live and Die in LA, but it's
and then you get to that end.
Yeah.
And then you get to that end where it's like stuff gets real.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You know,
exactly.
without giving it away for those who haven't seen it in the preceding 38 years.
Right.
But, But that ending that ending just hits you because even then, when you're, if you'd grown up in the 60s and 70s and you'd see these movies with anti-heroes as your heroes and these smash endings where everything just turns on a dime, even this one, it turns on the dime super quick and you don't see it coming.
Yeah.
So the impact of the ending just blows you away because it was just, where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah. And then in hindsight, it could have gone no other way when you think of the edginess and the grittiness and the toughness of this movie.
Absolutely.
It just fits in perfectly with it. I mean, it's shocking at the time, especially the first time you watch it.
Yeah.
But then in hindsight, you're like, yeah, I guess that does fit in with the motif of this movie and what we know of William Friedkin and how he just throws convention right off the bridge, like Richard Chance jumping off, the bridge right there.
Right.
Just throws it all out of there. It's awesome. It's great.
And the whole reason for the start of the chase scene, it's just like it starts off, the audience are thinking one thing because that's what the movie has told you. And then you get to a certain point where it becomes a complete, the scene completely changes, not because of what's going on in the chase scene, whatever, but just because you learn this little bit of information in the middle of everything that completely puts the perspective in a completely different place. And then when the chase scene is over, you learn of how wrong everything was because that information that you learned over here wasn't 100% correct. So the way it just keeps subverting your expectations of what you're supposed to think of the characters, what the people who are supposed to be the heroes, who maybe aren't quite heroic, and the bad guy who maybe isn't the worst guy.
Right.
And all the other bad. It's like there's really no hero in this movie.
No,
and that's totally fine. You don't need a hero. You don't need a character. You don't need the audience to establish an affinity with a hero character in order for it to be a good movie.
Yeah, we don't need a Pete Maverick Mitchell in every movie.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, and so that's why I think that movie worked so well, is just because it kept messing with your perceptions of what is good and what is bad, and who's a hero and who's not a hero.
Yeah,
and then even the denouement where you have his partner, Chance's partner, and the turn that he takes after that,
what an arc.
ending.
Yeah,
it's just like people weren't ready for that in the 80s.
Yeah,
now
you're working for me now.
Yeah, but it's just like those things didn't happen much anymore in the 80s. So when it happened, you're just like, holy crap.
Yeah, exactly.
And for those who are watching right now and you have not seen To Live and Die in LA, my God, watch it tonight. You're just gonna be blown away at how good this movie is.
Yeah, and it's a great callback to the 80s because now most movies are so sanitized and so corporatized. It just feels that way. At least to me, it does. Where it's so safe. Even when they try to be risky and edgy, they seem safe compared to just a grittiness and just that palpability, if that's even a word, of the 80s movies, And To Live and Die in LA is just it's so raw and gritty.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at the history of cinema, you have the musicals of the 30s, and you have the film noir of the 40s, and you have this rough and gritty thing in the 50s, and then you have this kind of like dual existence of like big Technicolor movies, and then you have the more of the movies like Bonnie and Clyde and Easy Rider that are looking at the underbelly of society, which seeps into the 70s for a while, and then everything kind of becomes sunny again for a while. And it's just like there are every period is defined by a specific genre.
Right.
And the best thing about the 80s was there were so many different things that there were so many different kinds of movies that were connecting with audiences, whether it was political thrillers or, there was a time in the 80s where the animated movie was dead.
Yeah.
Whether it was Disney or Don Bluth, cell animation in the 80s was dead for a very long time. There was a point in the mid 80s where Disney almost went bankrupt.
Sure. Yeah.
And what saved them was steering into PG-13 and R-rated movies with Touchstone Pictures.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, and this is one of the things like I was talking about earlier when I was doing my research for this one episode I'm going to do soon. Touchstone released its first movie in 1984, Splash.
Sure.
With Tom Hanks and John Candy and Daryl Hannah. And it was the first Disney-produced movie to feature any kind of nudity, where you see her backside for like 2 seconds.
You do.
Yeah. And so between 1984 and 1989, Touchstone released more movies than Disney proper did the entire decade. And it really only existed for 6 years instead of the whole 10. But also those Touchstone movies did far better than most of the Disney movies.
Yeah.
Tron wasn't a big hit. The Black Cauldron wasn't a big hit. Oliver and Company wasn't a big hit. And it wasn't really until American Tail in 1986 when animation started making its comeback that led to the Disney renaissance of The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King and Aladdin.
Yeah.
But there was several years where Disney was having so much trouble getting people to come see even their library animated movies that they almost went bankrupt.
Yeah, I think Aristocrats, isn't that one of them that didn't do very well?
Aristocrats was the first movie that came out without any of Walt's involvement. Walt died in 65, and they had Jungle Book and a couple other movies already in production. So the Aristocrats in 1970 was the first Disney animated. Sorry, she wants to say hi again.
Hey, Buffy.
But Aristocrats was the first Disney movie to not feature any involvement with Walt Disney. It was the first movie they made after he died.
Okay.
So, and even in the 70s, they were still doing okay. But it was in the 80s when nothing they did was working. And it was literally going more adult with Good Morning Vietnam and Ruthless People and Down and Out Hills Stakeout, where that's where the money was coming from. I mean, one of Disney's biggest hits in the 90s was a movie about a hooker and her John spending a week together in Beverly Hills. That's a Disney movie. Disney's Disney's Pretty Woman.
Find magic again. Bring your kids to the streets of Hollywood and meet this hooker.
But those are the movies that saved Disney from bankruptcy in the 80s. Was getting out of the one family quadrant and bringing in all these different kinds of ideas.
Right. Yeah. The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. And now we have, and I love Marvel movies. I don't disparage them. They're not all great, but I like the fact that they are taking a big risk, or they were taking a big risk to build this interconnected world that almost didn't happen. If Disney had gone broke in the 80s, you got to remember New World Pictures, Roger Corman owned Marvel in the 80s and sold off a whole bunch of different Marvel characters. That's why Disney had literally had to buy 20th Century Fox, was to bring back a lot of the bring back a lot of the Marvel characters back in under the Marvel fold, because a lot of those characters were sold off in the 80s in order for Roger Corman to finance other movies. The history of Marvel, and I talked about this in my episode last year about the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the 80s, where we might not have had this universe, and look at all the people that it brought to us. I mean, would Chadwick Boseman been the star that he became before he died if it wasn't for Black Panther? He had a good career going with the Jackie Robinson movie and Draft Day, but would he have become the Chadwick Boseman that we still love 3 years after his death?
Right.
If it wasn't for T'Challa, would Robert Downey Jr. be Robert Downey Jr.?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If he didn't have Iron Man, it's just like, because these movies, Canon Films tried to make a bunch of Marvel movies in the 80s. New World tried to make a bunch of them. I mean, all these companies. At one point, James Cameron wrote a 50-page treatment for a Spider-Man that he was going to make in the mid-90s.
Incredible.
So many filmmakers tried to do it and failed. And you see the movies that did come out, the Marvel movies that did come out in the 90s or didn't come out in the case of Fantastic Four, there was a great struggle because superhero movies weren't big yet and they weren't spending a lot of money on them. You watch that 1990 Captain America movie with Matt Salinger.
Sure.
It does a lot with a $4 million budget, but $4 million is like less than half of what Star Wars cost in 1977.
Yeah.
And so, how much can you do with $4 million on a superhero movie?
Yeah. And they were just kind of like just a few and far between superhero movies. I mean, you have every once in a while you get like a Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, which really, I don't know if you call him a superhero, but he's a comic book, figure, an individual or whatever. I mean, Blade, but there were so many years between Blade and the Punisher. I'm sure there's some other superhero movie in there I'm forgetting, but that's the point, is because you have like 5, 6, 7 years with no superhero movie, and then all of a sudden one just suddenly shows up, and it stars Dolph Lundgren of all people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Dolph Lundgren was one of the few. The Dolph Lundgren movie was actually supposed to come out in theaters in 1989, and the company that produced it and was supposed to release it went bankrupt, and then another company bought it, and they went bankrupt, and then another company bought it, and by the time it was like 3 years after it was made, and they just dumped it on home video. It went direct to DVD, but I actually had at my theaters in Northern California in 1989. I actually had the posters for those. I had trailers. It was going to be released, and then the company went bankrupt literally weeks before it was supposed to come out.
Yeah.
And so, and that's again one of the problems why we have so many 80s movies that have been forgotten, because do you know Buckaroo Banzai?
No. Buckaroo Banzai. Yeah. Okay.
Buckaroo
Didn't
Banzai.
hear you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Peter
So
Weller.
Buckaroo Banzai came out in '84. The guy who produced it was literally a huckster, a scam artist.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, or about 10 years ago, W.D. Richter, the guy who directed and co-wrote the movie along with his other co-writer, they did what's called a chain of ownership check to try to figure out who actually owned the movie.
Sure.
Because it could have been owned by Disney, it could have been owned by Fox, it could have been owned by like 3 other companies, because it went through all these, because of various bankruptcies by the production company, and then the company that bought that production company went bankrupt, and then another company. They spent 2 years trying to figure out who actually owned Buckaroo Banzai, and it turns out nobody could figure out. MGM is the one who quote unquote currently owns it, so they're the ones who've been putting it out.
Yeah.
But even MGM isn't 100% sure if they own it or not, but they're the ones who are the most likely current owners, so they're the ones that are claiming ownership for it. But that's whether, and that's why we're losing so many movies. I've talked about so many movies and have so many more movies planned for my show where you can't find them anywhere because nobody knows who owns them anymore. And because they're copywritten, and the copyrights now, it's the life of the author plus 70 years. Who's going to care about Buckaroo Banzai in 2084 if we don't keep discussing now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, not enough people cared about it 15 minutes after it came out. I mean, and it's a great movie. I mean, it's a
great movie. It's a lot of fun, and you look at the star power in that movie. Well, I mean, the stars now, but most of them were unknowns back then.
Yeah, Clancy Brown.
RoboCop's in it.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum's in it.
Yeah, Alan Barkin.
Ellen Barkin's in it, Clancy Brown. You know, you look at the cast and you're like, holy crap, this is like one of the best the cast ever assembled for the movie.
Yeah.
And so many people don't know it even exists because it's hard to find now, because even the people who made the movie don't know who owned the movie.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think fans of Guardians of the Galaxy would like Buckaroo Banzai because it has that same kind of quirky, off-kilter kind of vibe to it.
Absolutely. I mean, Buckaroo Banzai, for those who aren't aware about it, it's about a nuclear scientist who's also a surgeon, who's also a best-selling musical artist who tries to defend Earth from a group of aliens who invaded the Earth in 1938. And if you know Orson Welles' history with the War of the Worlds broadcast that caused a big panic, it posits that the War of the Worlds was not actually a fictional broadcast, that it was a real broadcast. And then you have like Christopher Lloyd and John Lithgow playing the aliens who are now, you know, getting ready to reinvade Earth.
Yep.
Who've been sitting silently, patiently for 50 plus years.
Lithgow at classic Lithgow sliminess.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you know, who's helping to fight the bad aliens? The good aliens are a bunch of Rastafarians. And it's such a crazy movie. If you've seen the movie, there's a scene where Buckaroo and a couple of his henchmen are trying to chase the bad guys through his compound, and Clancy Brown, the great prison guard from Shawshank, amongst many movies, the Kurgan in Highlander, great actor. They pass by a watermelon in a vice, and Jeff Goldblum's character, who's the newest member of the team, who literally joined that day, was like, "Why is there a watermelon in that vice?" And Clancy Brown says, "I'll tell you later." And then they never get back to it. And then about 10 years later, I was at a hockey game here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Kings versus the Boston Bruins, and I actually ended up sitting next to Clancy Brown.
Wow.
And so we're watching the game, and I kind of turned to him during one of the intermissions, the breaks, and I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't usually do this seriously, but I have to ask you a question about Buckaroo Banzai." And I was like, "What's up with the watermelon in the vice? Was there another scene that was shot?" And he's like, "No." It literally was just literally a sight gag to make you laugh during a chase scene. There was no meaning behind it.
Yeah. Just so many idiosyncrasies about that movie right there, and it's just so many different themes about it as well. And anytime you need to go there, Edward, just shout.
Oh no, don't worry. My wife is texting me that she's coming home from work, and she's got a 90-minute commute ahead of her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can kind of picture that because my sister and brother live out in L.A. One of them lives in Glendale, the other one lives in Burbank, right there. And so I get a little taste going out there from Fort Worth, Texas, and going out and visiting them.
So she works in Santa Monica. We live in Long Beach, but we have an electric vehicle. So even though she's driving alone, we have the sticker that allows our car to drive in the diamond lane. But even then, it still takes up to 90 minutes to get 20 miles in LA traffic this time of night. So I do have to go soon, but honestly,
definitely.
I could. It's 8:10 for you, 5:10 for me. I could keep you here until midnight my time.
Oh man, I'd be listening.
Never stop talking because like I don't know if you know the whole reason I even started this podcast. Do you know who Drew McWeeny is? He was Moriarty on Ain't It Cool News back in the 90s and 2000s.
No, I can't say I know him.
Well, he was one of my first online friends back in the early 90s, back in the IRC days. We were both moderators for the rec.arts.movie IRC channel. And he went on to become Moriarty. I started my own site, Film Jerk. And so even though
Sherlock Holmes Moriarty?
I'm sorry?
Like Sherlock Holmes Moriarty?
Yeah, that was that was in the early days of Ain't It Cool News, everybody had a secret identity, and he called himself Moriarty.
Okay.
And so he was one of my earliest friends, even though I've never met him after almost 30 years. He had a podcast called 80s All Over that he did with another friend, Scott Weinberg. And their mission was to do 1 month of the 80s at a time, starting with January 1980, talking about all the movies that came out in January 1980, and then 2 weeks later it'd be February, March, and then after they got through the 12 months, they would do a year-end wrap-up, and they were going to do the entire 10 years. It would take like 5 years to do.
Sure.
If it was once every 2 weeks, and then after they got partway through 1984, they literally like they recorded an episode and it says, okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks for the June 1984 edition where we're going to talk about A, B, C, and D. And then a week later, they posted on Twitter that they weren't going to be able to continue for reasons they didn't want to get into.
Gotcha.
And so that was April 2019. And then 3 months later, I started my podcast because as much as I love their podcast, they were doing the major movies of the 80s that everyone remembers and everyone talks about. I wanted to do more dives into the forgotten movies.
Sure.
And one of the great things about doing it is that I've learned about movies that even I didn't know of. I did an episode last month about a Canadian-made movie called Oklahoma Smugglers. I had never heard of this movie. It's not streaming anywhere. It's never been released on DVD or even VHS. It played in the South.
Okay.
Maybe in September of 1987. They put an ad in Variety, said coming out Friday in the South.
Sure.
And then I can't find a single ad for it. I can't find a single theater for it. The only place I can even find is like a Eastern European VHS tape from like 1989, where I actually I found a copy of the image of the back, and I literally went into Google Translate and had the image here and then had Google Translate here and typing in, and I forget if it was Serbian or Bosnian or Czechoslovakian or whatever, but it's like translating this thing because I'd never heard of this movie. And it's like, you know how hard it is? I mean, I'm not trying to brag, but my wife calls me the human IMDb for my ability to recall. I could tell you 40 years later where I saw Tron.
Yeah.
I saw it. I can tell you I saw it on opening day at the Aptos Twin Theater, auditorium number 1. Opening day, I sat in the 6th row from the back in the center. There was only like 18 other people in the auditorium. It sat 500. I can recall all of these things from 41 years ago.
Yeah. How much gum was underneath the seat in front of you? Like how many pieces? You remember that?
None, actually.
You're like, I don't check for that.
The manager of the theater kept that theater very clean.
Oh, good.
I actually became one of the managers of that theater 6 years later. And we kept that theater very clean.
Good. You mind if I sneak in a Real Genius mention here? Because that was another one of your episodes.
Not at all. Go ahead.
I had to mention it because that's just a crucial cog in my love of 80s movies there.
Right.
You got Better Off Dead and Bachelor Party and The Sure Thing.
I want my $2.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like I just featured. I don't know if you watch my latest episode about Gran Turismo, but I had to get the scene in there from Better Off Dead where he's about to ski off the top and he's got Curtis Armstrong up there at the top. He's like, "Give me some advice, man." It's like, "Okay, go that way, really, really fast. If something gets in your way, turn." And it's just like I had to sneak in like a Better Off Dead scene in there somewhere. So
yeah, that's what's one of the great things about 80s movies is that even though a lot of these movies are considered cult films, you can, I could say a line from a certain movie and you would know exactly what I'm talking about because you have the same love and the same affinity for these.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the things where I think that the podcast is coming along now is that the people who may have been reticent about listening to podcasts are now starting to get into them because I never listened to a podcast until 2018. And then I was doing podcasts a year later myself. And in part was because I was having those, I'd moved back to Los Angeles and was having those 60 to 90 minute drives each way to work.
Sure.
And so, but today my wife, and she loves me to death and she's helped me build this podcast. She would never listen to a podcast if her life depended on it. And that is not an exaggeration. She's a big fan of of several women in politics who have their own podcasts, and she'll never listen to any of them
Wow.
because she's not a big fan of quote unquote infotainment.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and I respect that.
Sure. Teach
But
their
every
own.
once in a while, I'll throw in a reference to her in one of my episodes to see if she's actually listening or not. Because I say things that if she heard it, she would come to me and be like, "Why did you say that?"
Do you hear that from the other room? I heard that, honey.
Yeah. So so Thursdays are the day that I usually record because she's out of the house.
Okay. Okay. Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
So I'll put the dogs in one part of the house. I'll put a cat in another part of the house. I'll close the door and I'll be able to record in relative peace, and then I don't have to worry about my wife hearing things that would make her angry.
Yeah, exactly. You got carte blanche at that point right there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Just because before, while I had you, I wanted to talk about Real Genius and just how like how legendary that was, even for me watching it, back in 85 and 86. And it's just a trip seeing how people are discovering it now. I mean, obviously you knew it way back, even obviously way when it first got released. But people looking back and going, Iceman was in that movie?
Yeah.
Wow. Doc Holliday was in Real Genius. Wow. I didn't know he made movies before Top Gun. And
he'd only made one movie before that, which was Top Secret.
Top Secret. Yeah.
Right. And if you know Top Secret, that movie is one of the funniest movies ever made. I actually like Top Secret more than I like Airplane, also written and directed by Zucker.
Yep,
I mean, as much as I love the Naked Gun series and as much as I love Airplane, Top Secret is just that's their best movie.
Oh yeah, it's got the best music out of all of them. So
it's just the whole thing.
Surfing and
the whole underwater fight sequence is just so absurd.
Goodbye.
Because of its absurdity. And the phone gag.
Oh right, yeah.
It's just like or the magnifying glass in the eye takes the eyes.
The bookstore, everything's going backwards, and
there's just so many things going on. It's one of those great movies that you have to watch a number of times to get every single reference because you're missing. You're so hard laughing at one thing that you're missing the next two.
Right, exactly. And it's got some witty stuff about it. It's like, let me know if his condition improves.
Yeah,
he's dead.
But Real Genius was another movie that just didn't succeed when it first came out, and I honestly believe a big part of it was because it not only didn't insult the intelligence of its audience by dumbing everything down, it kind of insulted stupid people for the entire, the way that they treat Gabe's parents.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The way that they even treat each other. They're all geniuses, but if one of them thinks that the other one's not as smart as them, the way that they just lay on to people who are not that smart. I think that was a big big reason why the movie just didn't succeed at first. On top of all the other science-based movies that were coming out, literally at the same time, Weird Science and My Science Project and Real Genius all came out within like 10 days of each other.
Yeah.
You can't release 3 science-based movies in 10 days and expect any of them to really succeed, and none of them did. Even the John Hughes one.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Real Genius is succeeding now is because in certain parts of society, they're embracing intelligence. And I'm not trying to get political here and say certain people are smart, but I think people are finding it is because it celebrates intelligence. It celebrates science. It celebrates trying to make the world a better place and then discovering if your creation is being used for bad means to try to make sure that you fix it so it doesn't happen that way.
Right.
And with all the problems that we're having in the world, not just in America, is that maybe that's not such a bad message right now.
Yeah, exactly.
That especially with things like AI and Chat GPT, where we see the way that's being applied in so many ways that maybe weren't the original intent of the creators, where we know that we have these issues around the world that are being caused by people on all sides who have bad intentions.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's why I think that real genius is being embraced now, is because it celebrates the goodness of people. It celebrates that science is good when so many people are down on science for various reasons. And
Yeah.
I watched it again right before I did the episode of it I did a series on the director Martha Coolidge earlier this year, and I watched it again, and it was just like, it was still funny, it was still poignant, and it still hit the right messages in terms of why it's okay to have a mistrust in science, but not a complete disregard for science.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because I'm
so,
like, I'm not anti-science. I'm a critical thinker. There, I like to employ the scientific method. I don't like people that just outright get rid of the scientific method.
right.
But even me being a critical thinker when it comes to science, I loved Real Genius because it's exactly like what you were saying. It shows that they had a love for science and particularly for laser technology and that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I liked how you pointed out that Martha Coolidge's fiance at the time. I think he said he knew about that stuff, or he had colleagues in.
Yeah, he
the
was
science.
he was in that field of sorts, but he had connections that he was able to help bring these people who were leading edge experts on this emerging technology.
Sure.
So they were able to not just be accurate about the science as it existed in 1984 when the movie was made, but to also be able to give the context in which the science can be used for nefarious means, which
Right.
is the entire third plot of the movie, or third act of the movie, where they discover that this thing that was supposed to be doing good for the world is going to be used for something that maybe not so good.
Sure. Right.
And
Absolutely.
and for me, I'm a person who's also like very empirical, you know, um, in terms of I will believe I believe what I can see with my own eyes and hear with my own ears and
Sure.
visualize and that's one of the reasons I love like shows like Bones, is because she's a skeptic in turn. Bones, the character, is a skeptic in terms of even some things that are scientific, because she doesn't agree with the science as it's being presented, and she'll
Right.
look for a scientific solution that works for her,
Yep.
that doesn't cheat science. So that's where one of my big things is just like, I love movies that and television shows where there's thought put into the ideas. Stranger
Yeah.
Things, like I tried to watch the first episode of Stranger Things, and it just drove me crazy because the Duffers weren't even born when the first season of Stranger Things
Sure.
happened, and there were so many little things that were happening in the background that I knew for a fact could not happen because um, those anachronistic things were happening, but they were integral to the plot of the story. But there's no way that this could have, these things that they're presenting that are integral to the plot didn't happen yet.
Right. Yeah.
And so I never even finished the first season. My wife loved the show, but she was much younger in the '80s and doesn't remember things being the way that I remember them. So
Right. Yeah. Once you get over
uh,
the fact that they try to like kind of what's the word? Kind of this give the '80s that kind of like the sweet saccharine, like over sweetened look to it. They
mm,
make the '80s look more fun than they actually were.
yeah,
More
the
glossed over.
'80s, the '80s sucked in many ways. High school sucked in the '80s. The job market sucked in the '80s. A lot of cars sucked in the '80s.
Hmm.
You know, when I was 16, my dad bought me a '72 Mustang Mach 1 fastback with a 302 block engine. I'm a car guy,
Oh, excellent.
and that was the last year of the classic Mustangs, because after that '73 Ford, they were just basically compact cars with a Mustang name on it. They didn't look like a Mustang. They didn't drive like a Mustang. And here I had literally the last of the original Mustangs. I loved that car. I didn't sell it until I moved to New York in 2001, because you don't need a car in New York. And
Right.
it actually
Right.
helped finance me living in New York for several months without a job, because I moved to New York 2 days before 9/11.
Great timing, huh?
Great timing. But and after 9/11, all the new hires everybody was kind of like, we got to get the people who were displaced from their jobs because of this,
Yeah.
reemployed. So I moved there in September, didn't find a job till almost Christmas. And
Incredible.
because I'd taken care of this Mustang very well, I sold it to a collector for close to $20,000, and that helped me live in New York without a job for months.
Right. In New York City. Yeah.
In
Wow.
New York City in
Yeah.
2001, which wasn't cheap, but it's just like, now I've lost my, I go on.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought.
I'll
Sorry.
save you. I was going
Thank
to
you.
ask you about New York there because I was, intrigued in knowing from you, like any kind of differences between the movie scenes in New York and LA. I mean, I imagine the pizza was definitely better in New York around the movie theaters and that kind of thing. So, but
Mhm.
like the vibe with the actors and just the people that, like the vibe around the theaters and that kind of thing. I'd be curious to know, like any kind of, differentiations between both cities from you.
Well, in New York, well, I didn't move there until 2001. I never even visited New York until 1998. But what I could tell you from the time that I was there, 2001 to 2005, was that New York still had a very vital movie theater community where there were a number of theaters that were playing older films, repertory movies. There were a lot of theaters that were single screen theaters that over the course of the years that I was there, it was still a wonderful place to go to the movies. And then over the course of time, not just because of 9/11, but all these theaters started closing. Um, like, for example, there was a fantastic theater in New York called the Ziegfeld.
Hmm.
It was built in the 50s. It sat 1,500 people. It had the entire, and you start off downstairs, you go up a level and up another level to the lobby, and then you go through these like beautiful French doors. And when you go into the auditorium itself, it's a very sloped theater. It's one of those old sloped theaters that also had like a mezzanine area. But everything in the theater was draped with red velvet carpet. Not
Yeah.
red velvet carpet, red velvet drapes and stuff. It had a actual curtain that was closed during when the movie wasn't on, and then when the previews started, it
Sure.
would
Yeah.
open, and then when the previews are done, it would close again, and there'd be some fanfare. It would open again, and there would be like a special trailer just for the Ziegfeld Theater before the actual movie came on.
Right.
It was a movie palace in every sense of the word. And about 4 or 5 years after I moved back to Los Angeles in 2005, they closed it. It sat empty for years, and now it's a supper theater.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and if you go back into like old movie premieres from the 80s and 90s and even well into the 2000s, in New York City, this was where they held the biggest movie premieres because it sat 1,500 people. It was a gorgeous theater. I would go see anything there. I saw the first movie I saw there was Moulin Rouge.
Okay. Okay.
And it was a fantastic fun. I saw they and one of the things that they did, the company that ran it, when it was between like blockbuster movies, they would bring back old movies, or they bring in foreign movies that normally didn't play there. So I saw Brotherhood of the Wolf there. I
Ooh, yeah.
saw Metropolis, the original 1927 silent movie from Fritz Lang. There were just so many great theaters. There was another theater a few blocks down the street in the middle of Times Square called the Astor Plaza that sat almost 2,000 people. I saw the first Spider-Man movie there, the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi one there.
Sam Raimi one.
But the last week of 2001, they actually showed 2001: A Space Odyssey in 70 millimeter, 6-track Dolby stereo. I'd already seen 2001 a number of times on television and several times in theaters. This was by far the best experience I had with 2001 because it was a proper movie palace with a humongous screen, 70 millimeter. You know how Christopher Nolan feels about 70 millimeter.
Oh yeah, he loves it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is definitely something about 70 millimeter film that is different. Even if the film wasn't made in 70 millimeter, that was blown up to 70 millimeter. There's just something about the format that makes it special. And
Oh
then
yeah,
you have a
absolutely.
big movie like 2001, being able to watch 2001 in 2001 in this grand theater, and now it's a small concert venue because
Yeah.
2,000 people is not big for a concert venue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can
Can you
imagine like
imagine?
watching a monolith scene, with
Yeah.
the colors flashing and all that. Because
Oh, yeah.
that goes on for like what, 5-6 minutes?
Oh,
Or
it's
it's just
like 10 or 11. Yeah, the
that's
Star
long.
Child sequence when he's running. Yeah, it goes
Yeah.
on, but being able to see it on like an 80-foot screen.
Right.
And the funny part is that because it was the last week of 2001, they had and it was Warner Brothers was releasing. They actually had the first Lord of the Rings in there for 2 weeks. Then they
Wow.
brought in 2001, and then they brought back Lord of the Rings after that. But for 1 week, they played 2001, the final week of 2001. And the show that I saw, like I said, it sat 2,000 people, and I went like on a Tuesday afternoon, and it was sold out.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
And so New York at the time, up until the mid 2000s, was still a wonderful place to see movies because of all these great old palaces. Do you know how many single screen movie theaters there are left in all of New York City, all 5 boroughs?
No idea.
1. It's called the
Wow.
Paris Theater. It's right across the street from Central Park at 58th and 5th, and it's owned by Netflix now.
Okay.
But here's the thing: is that Netflix has done something really interesting with it, where they have kept it as a movie palace. Starting tomorrow, if I'm remembering correctly, they are starting a series that's literally called Bigger on the Big Screen, where they are showing a bunch of classic movies, a lot of them in 70 millimeter, which have not been shown in theaters anywhere for a very long time. I'm sure if you go look for Paris Theater New York 70 millimeter, it'll pop up in the first page of Google.
I
But
will.
some of the movies you see on there, and I believe at least 2 movies are Friedkin movies, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's like a week-long series, and they're showing 5 different movies a day.
Right.
If they're not available on film, they're showing them digitally. But the screen itself at the Paris is a pretty good screen for a 550-seat theater. And that's a movie theater that I absolutely adored going to when I had the chance to. And I would love, if I was in New York, I'd be living there that entire
Yeah. And people love 70 millimeter because I had to go over to Dallas to go to the only 70 millimeter IMAX theater that is around for a great distance.
Mhm.
And yeah, Oppenheimer was, obviously in IMAX. I don't know if it's in IMAX still, but it was what, 5-6 weeks. It was there, and every single show, even the shows at like 2:30 in the morning,
Mhm.
were sold out for Oppenheimer and 70 millimeter IMAX because people just want it. It's a commodity.
Well, and that's one of the sad things about what's going on in the movie industry today is that there are so many original IMAX 70 millimeter theaters that got rid of their 70 millimeter projectors when digital became the thing about 5-6 years ago, who now only show, the few that still show 70 millimeter IMAX are the ones that didn't get rid of their projectors. And those projectors literally sit around until Christopher Nolan releases another movie.
Sure. Yep.
Oppenheimer in 70. What was the last movie to play in IMAX 70 before Oppenheimer?
Maybe
Tenet.
Dunkirk? Oh,
No,
Tenet. Yeah, that's
Tenet.
right. Yeah.
And
Yep,
the
yep.
last one before that was Dunkirk. And
Yep.
for the last 6 years, and most of the theaters, even these great theaters that were designed with 70 millimeter IMAX, are now showing, IMAX laser, which is still pretty good. But there's just something about 70 millimeter, and especially IMAX 70, especially movies that are shot in that format like Christopher Nolan does, that there's there's no better way to see it. And we've lost so much of it because the studios have spent decades devaluing movies.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that, when I was a kid in the 80s, you went to the movies to see movies. You went to movie theaters to see movies. They played in if it was a big success movie like Crocodile Dundee or Rain Man or Born on the 4th of July, Aliens, they played for months. The Fly.
Yeah. Right.
Played for months and months and months. And then it would come out on video a year or so later. And but you had to rent it or you had to buy it. Right.
Mhm.
And over the course of the last 20 years, now you can watch many movies as you want on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon,
Right.
of what they have available for
Yep.
$8, $9, $10. So getting people to go to the movies to watch a movie on a movie screen, a lot of people consider it to be too expensive today. But the funny part is that if you look at the ticket prices, and this is one of the things I do as a researcher and a historian. I was born in 1967, and movie tickets were $1.21 on average in 1967. You got to remember there was discount theaters, there was regular first run theaters, and then there were the roadshow engagements of movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World that played in one theater in town. That's that you literally had reserved seating, that you literally had to mail in a form to buy your tickets, and then they'd mail you the tickets for a specific show, and it would show twice a day, and it would play like the first movie to play at the Cinerama Dome, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. It was built specifically to play Cinerama films, but by the time it was actually completed and started showing movies, Cinerama was dead as a format. It never played a Cinerama film until the theater was restored in the 2000s, because with Cinerama, you need 3 different projectors. Actually, I'm going to borrow this real quick because I have it right here. One of the things I created over the years was literally like all the various film formats. So like this is an IMAX 70 strip of film.
Yeah.
And this is a regular strip of film. This is a regular 70 millimeter print. And Cinerama, I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah,
Cinerama was filmed. It was an early widescreen contraption where you needed 3 projectors to show the film because it was shot with 3 different cameras. That one camera was centered, one camera was shooting this way, and one camera shooting this way. And so when it was shown on an actual Cinerama screen using the free projectors, you had like a 190-degree view. And the way that it was shot is that there would be like these very small join lines between the 3 images.
Sure.
But because the format had died, this theater that was built for Cinerama never even showed it in its original format until 40 years after it opened. But It's a Mad, 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 Mad World played there for a year before it even opened at any other theater in Los Angeles. And it cost more than a regular movie theater because it was called a roadshow engagement. Because movies like Gone with the Wind and the big movies would only open in one theater in New York, one theater in Los Angeles, one theater in Seattle, one theater in Chicago. And if you wanted to see it, it didn't matter if you lived in the boroughs or outside in Jersey, you would have to drive to this one theater or take the trains or whatever.
Right.
And pay, if the average ticket price was 50 cents, you'd be paying $2. But to get back to, the pricing difference, $1.21 average ticket price in 1967 included roadshow engagements, the regular theaters, and the bargain houses. Today, you've got the inflated prices because of dine-in theaters, because of the PLFs, the IMAX screens, you have all the 3D, you have all these formats that increase the price of a ticket. Yet if you do the inflation numbers, the price of an average ticket today is like $10.45. And if you take that $1.21 ticket and inflate it over the course of 55 years, it's almost exactly the same price. Movies haven't gotten more expensive. It's just that the value of a movie has decreased over the last 50 years because of the way that we now consume movies, where you literally have all you can watch for one price a month.
Right.
And so one of the hardest things of listening to people complain about the price of going to the movies today is that the price is pretty much the same as it was a half century ago. It's just your perception of that being a value has changed. And you're not, and then, it's like I spent $200 on 5 tickets and buying all these popcorns and sodas. You don't have to buy the popcorns and sodas. Here's an interesting thing from working many years at a movie theater. Do you know how many people on average buy snacks at the snack bar at the movie theaters when they go to the movies?
Probably not very many.
It's less than 1 in 3. It's less than 33%.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
that's how theaters make their money most of the time, right?
Yeah, that's worth it. Yeah, because like when you're showing Oppenheimer, in Los Angeles, the first week, 90% of the ticket sales are going back to Universal. 10% stays at the theater, and then there's like cost adjustments because the studios. It's in the studio's best interest for movie theaters to exist. And then the second week it goes to 80-20, then 70-30, 60-40. And as the movie plays longer, the theater gets to keep more money. That's also another reason why movies are leaving theaters quicker, is because the studios don't like giving too much of their money away.
Right, yeah. We do the cost-benefit analysis, yeah.
Yeah, but if you do the cost price analysis between 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the cost of going to the movie has not changed. It's just now when you can watch, after I'm done with you, I can go on to Disney. I have 40 movies from the 80s, whether they're Fox movies that are now owned by Disney or Disney movies, that I can stream. I could literally be up until 2 a.m. watching these movies.
Right.
And it's costing me, because I also have the ESPN and Hulu bundle, it's technically costing me $5.50 a month, and I can watch 30, 40 movies a month.
Sure.
So telling somebody that the movie ticket is $10 or $11 or $12, or in places in LA now it's like 15, 16 for a regular weekend night, telling them that, hey, the movie ticket isn't really that expensive. It's your perception of its expense that has changed over time. They don't believe it. And so, and it took 2 generations to destroy that. So now, it's going to take generations to rebuild that. And one of the things we have to do is get people to fall in love with going to the movies again.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I have a pretty good sound system at home. I've got a pretty good television at home. I've got, the 4K Blu-ray and the 4K TV, and I've got the sound bars and the surround speakers.
Yeah.
Nice giant 70-inch screen. It does not remotely come close to anything at any movie theater I've ever worked at.
Particularly the size of the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Size of the screen. Even the best at-home Dolby Atmos system does not match the Dolby Atmos cinema system in theaters. Do you know how many speakers there is in an average Dolby Atmos theater?
Ooh, I couldn't even guess.
It's usually over 150.
Yeah.
Because most of them are single speakers in the ceiling, where the sound designers have done great care. So if there's a helicopter that's supposed to be flying over your head, before it would just be coming from the left and right surround speaker, so it'd be hitting you from both sides. But with the Dolby Atmos system, there's so many speakers in the ceiling that they could literally pinpoint. If they want it to sound like it's starting over here in the back and then it's flying this way, they could literally pinpoint each speaker at specific moments. So it really sounds like it's flying directly over your head.
Yeah.
Or missiles flying over your head, whatever. So they can, and the best sound system in the world that's not in Steven Spielberg's house, you're not going to get that at home. You're not going to get that cinematic experience. So, we as film lovers and we as parents of hopefully young film lovers in the future have to kind of rebuild that love of cinema. And,
right. Yeah. I think like the premium large format theaters, I think might be a good step in that direction, just from the audio visual standpoint there. But I also, because I just went and saw Gran Turismo at the Dolby Cinema version of that. And that is even a better example of what you're just talking about with the speakers and the audio and that kind of thing. Steven Spielberg probably doesn't even have a Dolby Cinema theater at his house. You're not going to get that. and so that's what makes it worth it. But it takes like getting people to the theater to see that and see that benefit and realize it for themselves instead of having Edward Havens or Van Ebert tell them, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Go there and experience it for yourself. But I think that kind of touches on another thing where we're unfortunately being trained not to be as social with people. You know, we've got our faces in phones, faces at home, like, you know, Netflix and chill, but with just one or two people.
Right.
You don't go out there and enterprise and communicate with other people and get that communication and that sense of fellowship together. And that's what I like about the movies is, even though I may not say two words to other people in the theater, it's a fellowship, right? It's congregating together. And
it's a shared experience of people who want to share that experience with other people.
Yeah, exactly,
and that's the thing that you're not going to get at home, even if you have a couple buddies over. You know, the funniest, if you watch Young Frankenstein at home with you and your wife and your kids, it's a funny movie. But you watch it with an audience of 150 people who are all hearing the joke at the same time and all having a similar reaction. Man, there's just no greater feeling. I've been playing movies I played movies for 30 plus years. And there were times where I would wish that the filmmakers would like, did you test this with audiences? Did you not notice that they're still laughing so hard from this joke that they're missing your next couple jokes?
Sure.
To just add something. So that and you maybe cut that out when you get back home, because, you know, obviously in 1974, Mel Brooks wasn't thinking about home video or streaming. But there's a lot of movies where you have to watch them multiple times because that first time you hear that joke.
Yeah.
That is such a funny joke, especially with those Mel Brooks movies in the 70s.
Right. Yeah, you bet.
You know, if you see Silent Movie, have you ever seen Silent Movie?
I have not, no.
Okay. Great Mel Brooks movie. It's him, Dom DeLuise, and Marty Feldman. And the entire movie is silent, except for one word. And I'm not going to spoil it. But
please
again,
don't.
Silent Movie is another, it's one of Mel Brooks's greatest movies, and it's one that is not shared in the same pantheon as Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein.
Right, yeah.
But it's an absolutely hilarious movie. But the entire thing is done, it's made in 1976, and it's made like a silent movie. So it has the intertitles, you know, they're talking, and then it'll be like one word. You know, they'll talk for like 10 seconds on screen, and then the title card will come up and it'll just say, no, you know, nope, or whatever.
Right.
And it's funny because, you know, the perception of what it's going to say when they finally put the card up and then
sure.
But there's a moment where if you know who that person is who speaks that one word in the silent movie, and then how it plays, Mel Brooks understood that in that moment he was going to need those extra couple beats, because that scene was going to be hilarious because of who was delivering the one line in a otherwise silent movie. So you watch the movie, and he understood that he was going to need that extra time.
Sure.
Because that scene pops up, and like I said, if you know who that person was, obviously it's almost 50 years later. They passed away a number of years ago. They're not as famous as they used to be. But that joke just hits. And it hits so well that he knew he needed extra time. And that's one of the things I love about older movies, is that the filmmakers understood you don't have to slam everything through at 100 miles an hour. It's okay to have that extra beat, to have that extra moment, to let people get their laughs out or get their scares out. Like, one of the best things about The Exorcist is that Friedkin gives you those extra moments after a big scare so that you have time to get back into the movie. Because if you do a jump scare and then you keep going, it's going to take them that extra moment to get back into it. They might miss something that's important because you didn't give them that extra time to process. So that's one of the many things that I miss about movies up until like the 80s and early 90s, is that now or they just pack in so much information that the movies have to be 2.5 or 3 hours long because they're trying to cram so much in. It's like, give it Give it time to breathe.
Right. Yeah.
I've actually seen more than one reviewer on Twitter in the last week. It came out that the new Marvels movie with Brie Larson
Oh, sure.
may be the shortest Marvel movie yet at 108 minutes. And I saw more than one movie critic say, I will give this movie 2 extra stars if it's less than 2 hours. Because it's because now we're used to Marvel movies that are 2.5 hours, 2:45, 3 hours long. And if this movie's less than 2 hours,
right, yeah,
it means that they're cutting out all of the stuff that didn't need to be there. But hopefully they still, if it's a comedy and it's supposed to be a very funny movie, I'm hearing, hopefully they're giving, even with that shortened time frame, they're still giving those extra moments where if there's a really funny gag, and I think James Gunn understood that enough for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and his Suicide Squad movie, where sometimes you just need that extra beat to let the joke play out in the minds of the audience.
Right, yeah, because that's one of the knocks on Marvel and DC movies, or some of them, is that they pack too much humor into it, where they have like these legitimate dramatic moments, these tense moments, where it would just enhance the movie if they would just leave them out there and let the audience just kind of take them in, kind of ingest them. But they always feel, I guess Marvel feels like they have to cut the tension because I guess they feel like people will think it's too awkward or something like that. They just don't want the tension. And I hate that when they do that, because you have a legitimate dramatic moment and then some bystander throws some stupid quip out there. And that's one of the knocks on Marvel. And back in the 70s and 80s, particularly people like William Friedkin, I mean, they understood that don't step on your own accomplishment. I mean, when you have a great scene and a great line that gets a great audience reaction, that's an accomplishment. That's something you should be proud of. Don't step on it.
Right. If you've ever watched French Connection, the scene where Popeye Doyle, the Gene Hackman character, is chasing the bad guy who's up in the subway car up on the L, and he's in the car chasing him, and at one point he almost runs a guy over and smashes into a trash can and stuff like that. The guy he almost ran over was actually one of the workers on the film, because Hackman was driving so fast that he missed, like he was off mark. Like the car's supposed to be going this way and he was just slightly off mark. So he almost hit one of the cameramen. And then if you watch the scene where he almost hits the cameraman, and then he hits the trash can and he kind of swerves back in. I remember Friedkin saying that 1 3-second clip includes 12 different edits. That because there was like something, there was 2 cameras in similar places that caught slightly different pieces. So he actually cut between them, but the cuts are so quick that he says, like, if you watch all of it in this one angle or watch all of it in this one angle, it's good. But when I cut it together the way I cut it over the course of just a couple seconds, it's exciting. Yeah. And when you see that moment, that's the moment that whenever somebody talks about the French Connection, that's the moment they go to every single time. Is that when he smashes into the trash cans and almost runs that person over.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's exactly the clip they go to every single time. Mm-hmm. Because in a 2-hour movie, that is just prime. And to learn, and the way that he does it, it looks like one continuous shot. But he actually says, no, there's 12 different edits in that 1 3-second sequence.
Yeah, it's such a kinetic, action-packed shot right there. So, yeah. I think French Connection, isn't that the movie where he was driving the DP crazy? Because it wasn't his DP like some filmmaker that worked for Castro or something like that in Cuba?
No. I'm not sure. The DP on it was Owen Roizman, who won an Academy Award for his work on it, and actually worked with Friedkin a number of times over the years. So if he drove him crazy, it was temporary.
Yeah.
But they had a good collaboration over a number of years. And sometimes I just wish that Friedkin was able to work with somebody like Roger Deakins.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Somebody who's just a master painter of light. There's just so many great combinations of filmmakers and cinematographers that could have been magic if they worked at the same time, but they never worked together.
Right.
It just would have been a William Friedkin movie shot by Roger Deakins. That could have been magic.
Right.
Because if you see what Deakins did in things like The Assassination of Jesse James or even Skyfall. You know, just like those are
Mhm.
just some of the most beautiful movies ever made.
Oh yeah, 1917, man. I was like, I
Yeah.
just think of Roger Deakins and just how beautiful that is, and
Yeah.
that one shot,
Yeah.
the
And
one shot
yeah,
movie.
but it's just like there's so many things that like it's like fantasy football. You know, wouldn't it be great if you could put, you know, or fantasy baseball? What if you had Clayton Kershaw and Shohei Ohtani on the same team? You know,
Sure.
that's what
Yeah.
I think that's one of the appeals of fantasy games is that what if I could put, you know, this quarterback with this wide receiver, with this running back, with this tight
Yep.
end that would
Tom
never,
Brady and Walter Payton and
yeah,
Jerry Rice and all on the same team. Yep.
yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah, Jerry Rice and Walter Payton as your two running backs. That would have been a killer team. But you know, the only way
Right.
that ever happens is fantasy football. I mean, like fantasy
Right.
movie making, you know, it's like imagining a William Friedkin movie with a guy like, you know, Janusz Kaminski or Roger Deakins, just,
Right.
you know, just masters. Because you see the movies that Spielberg made with Alan Davio or Kaminsky, you know, they're just even something simple like Jurassic Park, which is a lot of CG on top of what's being filmed. It's still such a beautiful movie, especially
Sure.
like in the sequences when it's raining and it's dark, but you still can see the actors clearly, even though your eye is mostly focused on the dinosaurs.
Right.
It's just
Right.
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
just so fantastic.
What do you think? Like William Friedkin just couldn't replicate that success that he had back in the early 70s. There, man, I just don't get that.
I think it's partial because he was not willing to compromise for the longest time. Because if you look at the movies that he made in the late 70s and early 80s, like Deal of a Century or Cruisin'.
Sorcerer.
Oh, no. Sorcerer is a fantastic movie. I will never say a bad word.
Oh, you're talking about the quality of the movie. Okay.
Yeah, just like,
you're
but
right.
Sorcerer is fantastic because he would not compromise. Sorcerer was a movie that was originally supposed to cost like $2 million and was supposed to be a little movie that he made while he was waiting to make another movie that ended up becoming one of the most expensive movies of the decade because he would not compromise on his vision. And then even a movie like Deal of the Century, where he wouldn't make compromises to Chevy Chase or anybody else, maybe comedy wasn't his best forte. And it wasn't in, you know, and then he made a movie like Rampage, which was a decent movie, but it sat on the shelf for 5 years because the distributor went broke and nobody would pick it up
Sure.
for several years. And then nobody would hire him for a longest time until his wife, Sherry Lansing, became the president of Paramount Pictures and put him to work like 4 times in 8 years because nobody else was going to hire him. And then when she left the studio, he didn't work again for almost another decade.
Wow.
So it's just like because because he was able, you know, his wife was the studio president. He could make even if they were cheesy movies, he could still make them the way, you know, like Blue Chips is not a great movie, but at least it's an interesting movie because he's trying to do what he does with basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's
like
not a great
mainstream
movie.
for him. It's mainstream
It's
for
pretty
him.
mainstream, but
Yeah.
and so the last 2 movies he made, Killer Joe and oh god, I'm forgetting the name of the last one.
The Kane Mutiny court martial.
No. It's called like Burn or something. It's got Michael Shannon in it, and it's about like it's a paranoid thriller where most of the stuff's happening in his head.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but you know, these were like very low budget independent movies because he couldn't find financing for bigger movies. So he kind of literally was like, okay, well, but I'm still going to make Killer Joe with Matthew McConaughey the way that I want to make it and make it kind of this weird paranoid thriller. And then now he passed away and his last movie is going to premiere at Venice in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if that's going to get some acclaim just because, you know, posthumously. I wonder if it's going to get some acclaim.
Well, I mean, if it's a William Friedkin movie, the way that William Friedkin can do movies, even if it's a court drama, it should be a pretty good movie, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't want him to lavish it with praise just because he just died. I mean, I want it to be a good movie. You know, don't besmirch his memory by just giving it some cheap praise just because he just, he passed away. But yeah, the court, like rules of engagement, yeah, like the courtroom drama with that. He made that movie more interesting than I think it otherwise would have been.
Right. In the hands of another director, even with that cast, it wouldn't have been interesting.
Yeah. Like when they were in the desert there at the beginning, getting what Ben Kingsley out of there, that whole desert motif kind of reminded me just a little bit of the Iraq, scenes there in The Exorcist and whatnot. I mean, not anywhere close to that, but it just reminded me of that. Like this desert setting, and then taking back to Max von Sydow,
it's definitely a callback of sorts to the Iraq sequences at the start of The Exorcist. But he was such a great filmmaker, and it's kind of sad that his luster kind of faded over the years, and that people who are in their 20s and 30s who won't watch a old movie are going to lose out on seeing some of the best movies ever made simply because they have this prejudice within them of older films. And for me, I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was growing up, and that's what when I was doing PA work and assistant director work, I was trying to build up towards a career in films, and didn't quite work out the way I wanted. But I would see any movie that I could, and try to learn from it. I wouldn't watch it as a film fan. I would watch it as just as a way of seeing how the directors do it. Sidney Lumet did 12 Angry Men many years ago. And if you watch the movie, and if you're really paying attention to the movie, the first third of the movie, when everything is still, when they're just entering the jury room, everything is shot at a higher angle down, so you kind of feel the room. And then at a certain point of the movie, the camera is now shooting at face level with everybody. Right. And then in the last third of the movie, when it starts to get really tense because they're all arguing about the fate of this person, because it's literally a question of life and death, he moves the camera so it's shooting up towards them. You can actually see the ceiling, and it feels like the room is closing in on them.
Oh, sure.
And Lumet did this as a conscious choice because he wanted the audience to feel the claustrophobia of the characters as the story progressed, as the fate of this man's life was in jeopardy. And those are things that you rarely see in movies anymore. Everything is now pretty much shot, master shot, close up, two shot, master. You don't get those stylistic choices that, even if they are subconsciously entering your mind, they're there, and you react to it.
Right.
And I think filmmaking in the 80s to me was like the last dynamic time for filmmaking. Now it just feels more factory-like.
Yeah. It's like cookie cutter and kind of sanitized, and it's just like the movies come off an assembly line, and they all follow the same template, and it just has that too artificial feel. I mean, obviously, movies inherently are artificial, but I mean, it just
they don't have to be.
Yeah, you're right.
You watch the French, going back to the French Connection. You watch the French Connection, it feels like a documentary.
Yeah,
in many ways, because the camera is regularly handheld. It stays on the actors instead of doing master cut close up.
Right.
I mean, it does do that, but in most of the movie, it's just straight shots of all these characters together, and then there'll be like an insert shot of them opening a briefcase or something. But most of it is just simply the character. What's happening just happens as if you're in the room with it.
Right. And some, if not all, of it's pretty run and gun, like, because they didn't have permits for a lot of it, didn't they?
Yeah. It's just that he wanted it to feel like a documentary.
Yeah.
And so he made it like that. But a lot of the things, but that was his signature, was that documentary feel. When you watch that sequence in To Live and Die in LA, the chase sequence, even though most of it is happening either on the freeway, or you're in the car with William L. Peterson and Pankow.
Yep.
It still feels like it's a documentary handheld camera, because the camera is moving as the cars are driving. And I still to this day have no idea how he got that sense of movement and intimacy during the middle of an intense car chase sequence.
Oh, right, yeah, exactly. In the car itself, and you see
in the car
Pankow, he's
itself,
freaking out in the
camera's-
back seat. Yeah.
The guy's dead in the back seat. They're Pankow's jumping around. Peterson is driving, and the camera is still moving between them within the car. Yeah. And that's something that is going to take somebody with vision to like have trust in their team to make it happen the way that you want.
And there's no music at all, so that makes it seem even more like a documentary there.
There's you just listen, and some of the best movies made just don't have a soundtrack or know when not to put music in. You watch The Last Jedi, and there's that sequence where Laura Dern blows up her spaceship in order to.
No sound in space.
In the space, because there's no sound in space, it blows up and there's no sound. And the first few shows, because we showed it at my theater, and the first few shows, people would come out and it's like, "There's a problem with your sound," because they weren't used to an explosion in space that had no sound.
Right. Yeah.
But a good filmmaker like Rian Johnson would know that at that moment that it's a more dramatic thing to have it happen in complete silence. There's this massive explosion. There's this rip. And then you finally get into the sound when you're back on the ship as it's exploding from inside the ship. But when you're outside and watching the explosion, there's no sound. There's no music. The theater's in complete silence.
Right. Yeah. Did they not see Gravity?
And that's an amazing choice for a modern filmmaker to make.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Gravity. I mean, that's another example of that right there, because that was mind blowing right there. You just see this chaos, the space station and the space shuttle being turned into coleslaw, basically.
Right.
And it's just like shards and pieces and death, from all this flying around, these people dying, and it's all in silence. It's like Mel Brooks' silent movie, It's like, and it's just, it makes it even creepier.
Yeah, but that's a sign of an intelligent filmmaker who thinks these things out. Yeah. And Cuarón has been one of the best filmmakers for the last 25 years. And one of the things I dislike about modern filmmaking is that filmmakers take so many years between movies. It's like it's been 4 years since The Irishman, and before that it was another 3 or 4 years. Scorsese only makes 1 or 2 movies a decade now.
Right.
When if you look at the 70s and 80s, he was making a movie every freaking year, sometimes 2 a year.
Sure.
And now, and now it's shocking when Steven Spielberg makes 1 movie a year.
Right. Yeah. I think James Cameron takes a cake on that one right there, because he'll go like 12, 13 years between movies. I mean, he'll fit a documentary here and there in between, but
But if you look at the time between Terminator and Aliens was less than 2 years.
Yeah. Yep.
It was 20 months.
Yep. And Aliens at the Abyss was what, 3 years?
3 years later.
Yeah.
And then T2 was 2 years after that. And then but he was still it was filmmakers are now making movies whenever they feel like it. And one of the things I lament about Cameron, and I actually say this in one of my episodes, is that I would rather see Cameron spend time working on other things than just making more Avatar movies. I'm not saying the Avatar movies are bad, but if he has to wait 8 or 10 or 12 years for technology to catch up and he's developing that technology to catch up to where he wants, can't you do something else in the meantime?
Right.
Isn't there any, and you look at the movies that he could have made that he was planning on making, there was like 3 or 4 movies he planned on making after the first Avatar that he never made because he just got stuck on Avatar 2. And that's going to be another 3 or 4 years before the next James Cameron movie, and then another 3 years before Avatar 4. Is he even going to be around to finish making them?
Right.
He's not a young chicken anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Is it going to be like, with Back to the Future, the sequels back in the late 80s, where you had Back to the Future, the first one came out in 85, and you didn't have another one for, 4 years? And then suddenly you had Back to the Future 2 and then 3, like right back to back.
Yeah, it was 4 years, 4 years, and then 8 months.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, it was 4.5 years.
Yeah, it's going to be like Avatar Way of Water. Then we're going to have Avatar 3, And then what? The very next year to be Avatar 4 and 5 and whatnot. So
yeah, and will he even make it to Avatar 5? And I don't know.
Right.
I don't know his health conditions and anything, but I think he's
Yeah.
like 70 now,
Something
and he's
like
going
that,
to be
yeah.
spending the next 10 or 12 years making more Avatar movies. And
Yeah.
and when I mean, look at the movies he made in his 30s and 40s. Those were some of the best movies ever made.
Sure, you bet.
And to you know, or now I hear that Greta Gerwig is going to be spending the next several years making Narnia movies for Disney Plus. And she's a fantastic filmmaker, but you know, I don't you know, I really wish that she would make other movies, because Narnia has already been done multiple times.
Right. Yeah. Don't lock
what are
yourself
you
into a
gonna
franchise.
what are you going to bring to Narnia that hasn't been brought to Narnia in 3 different series? You know, 2 television series for the BBC and the ones that Disney made years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't
Harness your inner Paul Thomas Anderson. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, that guy just makes all kinds of different movies. So
yeah, and I'm not a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan for personal reasons. And I've told that story before. I met Paul Thomas Anderson before Sydney even came out. The theater I was working at the time, in 1985, we were doing a test screening of it for the producers, and Paul Thomas Anderson there, because it was his first movie, and he was not happy with the way that the sound was coming out of the sound system in the theater. And so he wanted me to literally jerry rig a volume control so that he could be in the theater and have control of the sound as the movie's playing. And it's like, okay, you do realize though, if I do that, I'm going to have to leave the sound port that blocks out all the sound from the projector open. So you're going to have all the sound from the projector bleeding through the entire movie.
Sure.
He still wanted it done. And then I threw out a zinger that I was one of my favorites. It's like, well, shouldn't you have done that in post-production?
But he loved hearing that.
You know, yeah. And then after that screening, the movie was taken away from him and it was finished without him. It's still a decent movie. Hard 8 was a decent movie, but it's a much different movie from what he originally intended.
Sure. Right.
But it's just like, if you don't like the sound, you should have fixed that before you got to this.
Right. Yeah. Word to the wise, Christopher Nolan, you know, with your audio sound mixing and whatnot. It did get better with Oppenheimer a little bit, you know, just, you know, to go off on that tangent here about, you know, not being able to hear the vocals, the dialogue from the performers in Christopher Nolan movies all that much. But I guess he just doesn't, you know, put a premium on it. He's just like, well, you guys are all worried about it, but I'm worried about other things. I'm worried about having a bigger Hans Zimmer score or something.
Right. Well, I do have to go.
Okay. Hey,
you still have to review Gran Turismo.
I absolutely do. Hey, but I appreciate you giving me some of your time. Let's do it again because I had a trippy time. Hey, this is
fun. Well, anytime you're free on Thursdays, I'm free on Thursdays. Let's make this happen.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's do it. All right.
Alrighty.
Thanks
Thank you so
Edward.
much, man.
Yep. You bet.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Take care. All right, everybody. Yeah, put your hands together for Edward Havens from the 80s Movie Podcast. So, yeah, if you guys thought that was bad, I could talk to that guy for hours and hours and hours, and I'm sure you guys are like, please don't. It's like, let's move on to something else here, because that's one of the reasons I created this Movies America spoiler warning, because I'm a big movie nerd, and I could talk about stuff like that over and over again and that kind of thing while everyone else is yawning, going nuts. All right, hey, let me let you guys know a little bit about something here while we got a chance here. So, and that is our tdpn.locals.com website here. Yeah, definitely check this out because it's got all our great content there, like our videos and our blogs and our articles, all about everything from movies and entertainment to cocktail recipes to politics, you know, hot button intense issues, that kind of thing. Chances are you might see the word Trump in there. So, you know, never know, you know, hot button political issues, that kind of thing. So, and then right now, starting tomorrow morning, everybody get in there because my Movies America Mad Libs is back. Yes, with Scene 2. Yeah, Scene 1 scared the living shit out of you? Well, just wait till Scene 2, all right? You're going to be calling your grandma, your third cousin Willie, calling everybody to check out Movies Merica Mad Libs on tdpn.locals.com. And some of you might be going, what the hell is Movies Merica Mad Libs? Well, I shall tell you. So remember Mad Libs when you're a kid? You get the Mad Libs tablet, little pad, and you could, fill in the words with the paragraphs that they gave you and whatnot. So, okay, well, Movies Merica Mad Libs is my version of that, okay? But what it is where it starts is, of course, it's a movie script. And with every movie script, you have characters, right? Well, I've created 3 characters for movie script. And then for each of the characters, I've written like the first 3-4 lines for each of the movie characters. Now, the Mad Libs part is where you come in and you go to tdpn.locals.com and you can get in there and you can write more lines for each of the characters in this scene 2 of the script. And so you get to go nuts. You get to go crazy. You got carte blanche there, baby. Okay. You're having a bad day. Your boss is on your ass. And you're like, you know what? I just want to take it out on somebody. Hey, I'll write some lines in Van's Movies Merica Mad Libs. Now, I think this will be the final selling point, because whatever you write, we have to read. Me being myself, Sean, and Ian, we have to read that shit. Okay, we have to read whatever you write on there. Okay, on a live table read coming up here in the future on this show right here. So go nuts. Okay. Do your worst, as they say on Spaceballs. Okay. And in order to do that, though, that's a premium member only perk. Okay. So you basically just pay at least $3 a month for that, or you can go and you can put in promo code TDPN as it shows down there at the bottom, and you get 1 month free membership. And that gives you the access you need to do your sickest, your most depraved in writing some lines for the Movies Merica Mad Libs script in there. So get in there, go nuts, okay? And then also like this video if you would, and then subscribe or follow to this channel here, wherever you're at, Rumble, YouTube, what have you. And then hit that notification bell down there, okay, so that you get notified of hot, fresh, sizzling, piping hot new episodes of this show. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move it along there, peoples. Okay. So the fantastic conversation, and that may just be my take, and hopefully you guys didn't all fall asleep, but but the fantastic conversation with Edward went a little bit longer than I was anticipating there, but perfectly fine. I can't wait to have him back here and talk more 80s movies. Let's get right into this here. Let's do a little, a little brew review time. All right, my friends, Romans, countrymen, 2 days, whenever you're watching this episode, the lucky beer for this episode or this segment of brew review time is a little Peroni Nasto Azzurro, and this is a European pale ale there from obviously Europe, from our friends over in Italy. Yes, and this is just like a crisp golden blonde beer here that it's just got some good citrus notes, some rather interesting aromatic flavors and scents that you could smell, and this is kind of like, it's almost like Italy tried to make a Corona, or not even a Corona, like a Dos Equis. Okay, so it's like an Italian Dos Equis is my interpretation of this right here. But it sounds like I'm cheapening it. I like Dos Equis, but it sounds like I'm cheapening it if I call it like the Italian Dos Equis. But it is kind of that. But good luck finding this where you're at, unless you live in like a major city like I do here. But you could probably go to like gopuff.com or drizzly.com and get it there, because that's like the Amazon of booze, okay? And it sounds exactly how it sounds. I would recommend Peroni, and I'm not getting any money from this beer here. But definitely a good, crisp, light beer here to take in. Like, you getting back from playing some beach volleyball or mowing the lawn, grab yourself a Peroni here. And I'm going to grab myself a Peroni and drink it up right here. Ciao bella. All right. It's only Italian, I know. But yeah, it's like 5.1% alcohol by volume. there. So it's not going to knock you on your ass. Okay. You'll still be able to drive your Ferrari home. Okay. All right. So, hey, we're going to keep it nice and short here with the brew review time. So that's been it. All right. So, hey, Gran Turismo, right? Basically that's what this episode is all about here from here on out. And if you guys have seen Gran Turismo, get in the live chat and let me know what you thought, favorite character. Maybe you hated it. I don't know. Maybe you're like, God, I ruined the day. I ruined the day they created Gran Turismo. This movie sucks. Okay. I'd rather watch Biodome for the 17th time. Okay. Let's check out the live chat here. Oh yeah, there we go. I'm glad you put that up there, Sketchy Jesus, because I was like, I'm ignoring it unintentionally there. Yeah, very interesting interview with some cool movie facts. I'm not as much of an old movie nerd, but it was cool. Then he said Rian Johnson was a great director. Yeah, he gets a bad rap because of The Last Jedi. That was a. Now I've told you this, Ian, that, yeah, I have a controversial take on The Last Jedi. Not that I think it's a good movie. By no means is it a good movie. I just don't think it is like the pile of dog vomit that a lot of people think it is. Okay, it's got a lot of stupid moments in it. Princess Leia flying around. Suddenly she's a Jedi. The stupid casino planet. I mean, right. There's a lot of shit that's wrong with it. I just don't think it's the colossal dumpster fire that most people think it is and whatnot. But enough about The Last Jedi. I like Rian Johnson's movies like Looper. That's a fantastic movie if you've checked that out. It has nothing to do with Star Wars. A Brick is another Rian Johnson movie that's fantastic. So that's why when people burn Rian Johnson in effigy right now, it cracks me up, because I remember when Rian Johnson was like some director that nobody knew who the fuck he was. And then he directs a Star Wars movie and everybody knows who Rian Johnson is. And not only do they know who he is, they want to run him over with their car 5 times and twice that on Sunday. Yeah, the lack of audio in that one scene was one of few saving graces of that Lizzo-sized dumpster fire. There you go. So yes, there you go. You are part of the masses, absolutely. So, and that's a great thing about movies. Hey, everyone can have their opinion. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I mean, I happen to think that The Naked Gun is the greatest movie in cinematic. No, I don't really think that, but but yeah, Gran Turismo. This is the breath of fresh air that I personally needed right about this time, because this movie came out a couple of days after we all found out that Dune Part 2 will not be available for us mere mortals to watch until March of next year. And then after seeing so few good movies this summer, Oppenheimer and Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1 being a couple of notable exceptions. Sound of Freedom, Talk to Me. Those are very exceptions in the middle of a bunch of dumpster fires, to use Ian's parlance there. So, and so the time was nigh for a good movie, another good movie, surprise or not. And Gran Turismo has just been that positive kick in the balls, if that is a thing, if that's possible. But it's a fantastic movie that came out of fucking nowhere. I'm not a video game movie fan. I don't like curse their name, but I don't really, I don't sprint to the theater to go see video game movies. But I was hearing some good whispers about Gran Turismo, and hey, it is my job to review movies, and so I was going to go see Gran Turismo. And I remember, walking out of that theater at the end and having that same Peter tingle that I had after coming out of Top Gun Maverick last year. I mean, I was like, oh God, I wanted to get in my car and just fucking drive, to my, go Mach 3 with my hair on fire, it just felt positive, felt inspired and uplifted, or was that uplifted? I felt I had an uplifting feeling. There we go. We'll say it that way. Just because it was a great, it's a great comeback story. It's a great underdog story. And the movie had no pretension about it. It just it was very earnest. No cynicism to it. It's just like, okay, here's this kid. He plays Gran Turismo, the driving simulator. He's really, really good. And lo and behold, he has this chance to take those skills that he's honed, particular skills that he has yielded over a number of years, to steal from Taken. Comeback stories like Kim Kardashian. Some people pay extra for positive kicks in the balls. I hear that. I've been to Amsterdam, and I remember going by that place. Yes, it was right next to the Vandersex shop from Eurotrip. Yeah, Gran Turismo was just like this fantastic movie. It is this fantastic movie, and if you haven't seen it, man, just go out and check it out. I keep trying to sell people on going to see it like at the theaters, like with a big sound system, but particularly Dolby Cinema. If you have it, or if you have to settle for IMAX, I guess you'll have to do that. All right, okay. Yeah, I mean, and the performances in it were fantastic and funny and uplifting and inspirational, and I make it sound like it's a Christian movie when I put it that way. Now, one thing that I couldn't really put out there until the spoiler warning show about this movie is, of course, spoilers, even though it's a spoiler warning show, just let you know, there's a big accident, like, in the beginning or in the middle of the movie, that really starts out, I think, like act 3, we'll say it starts out the third act, and there's a big wreck, and unfortunately it kills a spectator at this race, and it's this big dramatic segment where Jan is just, he doesn't know if he can get into a car again. He's just beating himself up because he's like, okay, if I had never taken on this endeavor, I would, that person would still be alive today. He's beating himself up. It's a freak accident. It's not his fault. But again, there was someone unfortunately killed, a spectator. And this crash happened in real life. Okay. But this movie is based on a true story. Now it throws a lot of this true story out and changes a lot of things. I mean, it's a movie, people, not a documentary. Okay. But I was kind of thinking about it. It's like, I wonder if they should have had a scene where Jan, Martinborough goes and he visits the family of the deceased or something. Or I don't know, maybe that would have dragged the movie down, it just made it more depressing. Because in that part of the movie, after this all happened and Jan is in sorrow and grieving, so to speak. Yeah, it is a pretty down part of the movie. So I guess I probably would have dragged it down a little too much right there. So, but that was just one of my thoughts that I could share in the spoiler warning show about Gran Turismo. But it's got a great soundtrack to it as well. I mean, Lauren Balfe and I forget the other gentleman's name, like Andrew Kaczynski. No relation to Ted. They had this pulse pounding kind of. It's an orchestral score, but it's got a lot of synth in it. It reminds me of Hans Zimmer's score from Dune. In it, it's just fantastic. It really adds to it. And it's the same guy who did Lauren Balfe, same guy who did the soundtrack to Top Gun Maverick. So if you're getting some Top Gun Maverick vibes from it, that's another reason why you're getting Top Gun Maverick vibes from Gran Turismo. All right. Well, you know what? Hey, let's get into my favorite segment of each Movies America spoiler warning show, and that is the movie military moments. Okay. And let's get our ducks in a row. Got to do a little housekeeping here with that. Okay. So the movie military moment, what is it? Well, okay. Obviously, we have servicemen and women. They win the Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay. And in order to win that, they have to do some pretty hellacious, eye-popping shit, to win the Congressional Medal of Honor, right? They have to, mow down a bunch of the enemy, and they're flying, they're flying a fighter jet or flying a helicopter or something like that, or they have to, give the ultimate sacrifice, the last full measure of devotion by, falling on a grenade for their comrades to save their comrades, or mowing down a bunch of Japanese in a pillbox in World War II. Like some shit where if you saw it in a movie, you'd be like, holy fucking shit, this is fucking, I don't know if it's cool, but it's intriguing to watch, right? And so that would be a cool movie military moment, okay? And so I like to just dedicate a few minutes, if you will, to each Movies Merica spoiler warning episode to those servicemen and women that do go above and beyond to win a Congressional Medal of Honor, okay? And so this episode's Medal of Honor recipient is one Private Henry Johnson from World War I. So, you know what? Let's give Henry some music of his own. What do you say, huh? Let's do it. Is a movie military moments, and we show dedication and honor to Private Henry Johnson from World War I, who served with distinction in France. Let's get right into it for Private Johnson. Private Henry Johnson distinguished himself by extraordinary acts of heroism at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as a member of Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, American Expeditionary Forces on May 15, 1918, during combat operations against the enemy on the front lines of the Western Front in France. In the early morning hours, Private Johnson and another soldier were on sentry duty at a forward outpost when they received a surprise attack from a German raiding party consisting of at least 12 soldiers. While under intense enemy fire and despite receiving significant wounds, Private Johnson mounted a brave retaliation, resulting in several enemy casualties. When his fellow soldier was badly wounded and being carried away by the enemy, Private Johnson exposed himself to grave danger by advancing from his position to engage the two enemy captors in hand-to-hand combat. Wielding only a knife and gravely wounding himself, Private Johnson continued fighting, defeating the two captors and rescuing the wounded soldier. Displaying great courage, he continued to hold back the larger enemy force until the defeated enemy retreated, leaving behind a large cache of weapons and equipment and providing valuable intelligence. Without Private Johnson's quick actions and continued fighting, even in the face of almost certain death, the enemy might have succeeded in capturing prisoners and the outpost without abandoning valuable intel. Private Johnson's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself. Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, and the United States Army. We give it up for Private Henry Johnson. Yes, I bow to you, Yes, all right. So yeah, you have helped provide the freedom that we all too often take for granted nowadays. Think about how bad your life is. Imagine being in the situation that Private Henry Johnson was in that situation. And life doesn't seem so bad, does it? All right, well, this has been the movie Military Moments. Okay. Love that segment. Fucking love it. All right. Okay, hey, you know what? Let's switch it up here a little bit again, okay? Because, Gran Turismo, it's a racing movie, right? Obviously, it's a racing / video game movie, and I love racing movies. Love them, okay? And I have 5 particular racing movies that I consider my favorite racing movies. So, you know what? Let's get right into it. What do you say? Yeah. The top 5 racing movies. Okay. And we're just going to go from 5 to 1. All right. Let's get right into it. Talladega Nights. Yeah. If you ain't first, you're last. Let me do that again. If you ain't first, you're last. There we go. I don't know where that came from. It's like I had a brain aneurysm there for a second. Yeah. If you ain't first, you're last. Okay. All right. This is a classic Ricky Bobby. Yeah, doing the shake and bake. Yeah, this is a classic comedy movie. I mean, I know it's primarily a comedy, but it obviously involves racing, right? It revolves around it. It lives the racing lifestyle, right? Especially when that stupid Frenchie comes over and tries to horn in on NASCAR. I tell you, that damn Frenchie. I swear to God. Yeah, Ricky Bobby. This is like his follow-up, so to speak, to Anchorman. Adam McKay, was directed Anchorman, and then he directed Talladega Nights. one of the most quotable movies of all time. You know, like what's his Highlander? Greatest movie ever made. And we got to meet Amy Adams. Amy Adams came out of this movie. Nobody knew who the fuck Amy Adams was, but Amy Adams came out of Talladega Nights and was one of the last roles of the late, great Michael Clark Duncan there, better known from The Green Mile. And we got Leslie Bibb there, who we saw later on in the first Iron Man. But yeah, just a classic movie. It's goofy. I mean, it's a goofy, funny, comfortable watch, right? If you're in a bad mood, just throw on Talladega Nights and just check out, the trials and tribulations of Ricky Bobby and the family of Ricky Bobby and his dad, and trying to earn his dad's respect, and trying to become a driver. He just wants to go fast, right? And then his kids, gets married to Leslie Bibb, and he's got those two fucking rotten ass kids. I'm gonna jump you like a spider monkey. Just we threw your medals over the bridge, Grandpa. Just a great time with Talladega Nights. It's just fantastic. So I find it hard to believe that no one here has seen Talladega Nights. And so I think it could spoil that. Talladega Nights. He wins really big at the end. Okay. Right after they go to Applebee's here and shake and bake. Yeah, shake and bake. I love that scene. One of the scenes that not a whole lot of people mention about Talladega Nights is that scene where Cal is living in Ricky Bobby's old house, and Ricky Bobby's living with his mom, and this Cal Nod's like calling Ricky Bobby, "Hey, what are you up to, man? I don't know. I don't want to talk to you, man. I hate you." Yeah. He's talking about like he's hearing strange noises, in his old house and shit. I just love it. It's like, I want to talk to you, man. It's like Cal Nod Jr. is so clueless. He doesn't even realize, like, yeah, you stole my wife. You can't be calling me and trying to have some bro time while you're begging my wife and living in my house. So I just thought that was class of Adam McKay writing right there with Talladega Nights. Okay. All right. And like Ricky Bobby on the track, let's keep it moving. All right. Days of Thunder. Yeah, Days of Thunder, which gets referenced, of course, in Talladega Nights. Save me, Tom Cruise. Save me. I'm on fire. Save me, Tom Cruise. And so this is kind of like the unofficial follow-up to Top Gun, except this is, Top Gun on tires, right? And we get Tom Cruise. He's playing the best, right? He's not the best pilot in this. He's the best NASCAR driver, and he's got to fight against all odds. I mean, he's so good. He's never driven NASCAR before, and then he gets into a stock car the very first time, and he's breaking lap records and shit, and impressing, Rowdy Burns and all that, all the professionals, and teams up with Robert Duvall, and they basically build up all this drama. He stacks up some wins. He's going after God, I forget who Carrie Elway's character's name is in this, but he's got a big baddie he's going up against, and then he beats Nicole Kidman, his future wife in real life, and so he goes. It's kind of like it's almost plays out like the plot almost plays out step for step like Top Gun, where he's the best. He's moving up the ranks. Something tragic happens. He finds comfort in the arms of a beautiful woman, and then he has to struggle with his personal demons to get back on the track, except for Goose dying. It's in Days of Thunder where he gets in a really bad wreck and whatnot. And so it's a slick movie. It's a Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson at their glossy, glamorous Hollywood best, which in this, of course, resurged a lot of popularity in NASCAR, and you get to see a lot of cameos from people and drivers in Days of Thunder, Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace and Cale Yarborough and all these great drivers in Days of Thunder. So yeah, that was a racing movie number 4. All right, moving on. Number 3, Rush. No, not the biography of Rush Limbaugh. No, this is a Rush with Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl. And this is also like Gran Turismo. This is based on a true story. And you got Chris Hemsworth, and he plays driver James Hunt. And then you got Daniel Bruhl, who a lot of people probably know from Captain America Civil War. He played the big baddie in Captain America Civil War. But in this, he plays Niki Lauda. And they're just like open wheel racers back in the 70s, I believe. And this is a Ron Howard movie. Okay, so Ron Howard, I mean, you know, he's not making movies about mermaids and Kurt Russell fighting fires and Tom Hanks getting a deep shit in space. He's making movies about stock cars, or not stock car, but open wheel racers back in the 70s. And this is a good racing movie if you really want kind of a more dramatic, biographical, less flashy, but you know, kind of more cerebral. It's more cerebral, more academic racing movie. But it's captivating because I mean, I didn't know a whole lot about James Hunt and Niki Lauda before this movie, but it makes a movie that on its face to like, you know, Joe Blow, which wouldn't sound that interesting to just, you know, John Q. Public, right? They're like, what, a movie about racers in the 70s? Blah, boring, right? But when you start watching it, get half an hour into it, you're like, this is pretty fucking good, all right? And it's got a pretty good Hans Zimmer soundtrack in it as well. It's pretty fantastic, and it just adds to the action. And the racing scenes are pretty good in it. And, of course, it's got hot-ass Olivia Wilde in it. That never hurts a movie when you got hot-ass smoke show Olivia Wilde in your movie. But, if you want to see Chris Hemsworth in a non-Thor role, check out Rush. And he's pretty charismatic, pretty charismatic in it. Daniel Bruhl is good as Niki Lauda. He seems kind of like a Weasley Weasel. if that is a thing. But he starts kind of growing on you a little bit. You start kind of rooting for this kind of nerdish Niki Lauda guy going up against, you know, the ruggedly handsome James Hunt, you know, Chris Hemsworth, you know, there. But yeah, good movie, Rush. And so out of the interest of time, you know, because I'm in a rush, we're gonna move on to the next movie. And hey, Gran Turismo. Yeah, you might have heard this movie mentioned earlier in the episode here. So this is our very movie that this episode's all about. And this should tell you how much I love this particular racing movie. I mean, this racing movie is legit because the racing scenes in it are filmed in a way that you don't see in any other racing movie. I mean, Days of Thunder, they didn't have FPV drones flying around, getting great racing footage way back in 1989 and 90 when Days of Thunder was being filmed. Don't see it in Talladega Nights or Rush. You see that for the very first time, really, in Gran Turismo when it comes to a racing movie. Now, a lot of these FPV drones, the footage that you get from it, Michael Bay used it in Ambulance, a year or two ago. But you get to see this cool drone footage, like zipping back and forth in between the cars and shit. Makes it look really badass. And then the sound design in this, where you get the engines revving and the tires squealing, and the mechanical internal components, just, you know, pistons popping and shit, you know, and fuel rods going left and right. I mean, it's just very visceral, very kinetic, and it just really drives home the point how fast these fuckers are going in these cars. I mean, and it also really drives home how claustrophobic it is in the cars and just how deadly this is, because you're in these cars going at least 250 miles per hour, 300 in the straightaways, right? And you fucking even do like one thing microscopically fucking wrong in your fucking roadkill, okay, potentially, or you're a piece of chicken in a bucket of KFC, okay? And so the stakes are that high, and then what really intensifies it and elevates in this movie is the human drama, because they actually took the time to create these characters you actually give a fuck about, okay? Characters that you don't want to see crash and die, right? You want to see them win, okay? And then you have other characters that you want to see lose. And just a fantastic writing in this movie that makes you care about these characters. So Gran Turismo, yeah, definitely check it out. I know I've been, basically blowing sunshine up this movie's ass left and right in this, but hey, it's for a reason. It's good. Go out there, fuckers. Get it. You're not fuckers. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. All right. I love you all. Okay. All right, I'm embarrassing myself. Let's move on. All right, and the number one racing movie, in my humble opinion, is Ford v Ferrari. Okay, now the thing that differentiated to give this the edge over Gran Turismo is the acting is just, not that the acting in Gran Turismo is bad. It's just, come on, for God's sakes, Ford v Ferrari's got fucking Christian Bale and Matt Damon in it. Okay, two of our premier actors of our generation. And then also, in addition to that, what makes it better in my eyes in Gran Turismo is just the story is less cliche. Because if you watch my spoiler-free review of Gran Turismo, I admit it's got a lot of cliches, but that's just the nature of an underdog story. You're gonna have a lot of cliches, right? Where Ford v Ferrari is kind of an underdog story too, but there's a lot more nuance to it. And if you've never heard of these characters in real life, if you've never heard of Matt Damon's characters and Christian Bale's character, then you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to learn it in a very entertaining way. And Christian Bale, I think he outshines just a little bit. He outshines Matt Damon just a little bit in this movie. And just his great relationship with his son in this movie is just one of the great dramatic flares about Ford v Ferrari. And it's just got some fantastic racing in it. It's got a great soundtrack to it as well. And it's directed by James Mangold, who you know from other movies like Logan and Walk the Line. And I can't believe you just directed the latest Indiana Jones movie. My God, just that's why the latest Indiana Jones movie, The Dial of Diarrhea, I can't believe it was so fucking bad, because James Mangold, who directed Ford v Ferrari and Walk the Line, a 310 to Yuma, and Logan, directed that movie, and that movie was that was a fucking dumpster fire. But Ford v Ferrari is one of the good James Mangold movies. Okay, he's got one shit stain on his record, and that is the latest Indiana Jones movie. And then Ford v Ferrari is the rest of his movies, which is a very impressive resume. And so Ford v Ferrari, fantastic movie. It'll have you standing up and cheering. And I remember, this is one of those movies, looks like Gran Turismo, where the audience in the theater, and you barely ever see this anymore, audience in the theater was cheering. They were clapping and hooting and hollering and shit. So, and it's just fantastic. That's the fellowship I love about going to a movie theater. It's that sense of community right there that you don't get that with most movies, but every once in a while you get a movie like Gran Turismo and Ford v Ferrari, and you get people just hooting and hollering, and it feels right, man. It feels so right. It can't feel much righter. Okay. That has been my top 5 racing movies. All right. So let me know what you guys think of my list. Do you think like, oh my God, Van, what were you fucking smoking when you came up with this list? Or you're like, Van, I was suspecting that you were a genius, but now it's been confirmed. Yeah. Probably not that. I'm probably not going to hear that. But hey, Darth Jason, welcome to the live chat. I thought I saw my good buddy Darth Jason in the live chat. So great to see you in here, showing some support for the Movies Merica Spoiler Warning family. Yes. All right. So let's get that off of there. And hopefully more of your compadres will show up. Unfortunately, when Astro Sweat and Cat Riley and Beer Drinking Trev were in here earlier, we were hip deep in the middle of the interview there with Edward. And so I apologize for not engaging with you the way that I really, really wanted to there. Absolutely. But hey, you know what? Hey, hopefully that suffices for an apology. Probably not, but all right. Hey, you know what? I don't want to end this stream without letting you guys know all about the bannies here. So yeah. Time is short to vote in the bannies here. So, because the deadline, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong there, Ian. Today's the last day. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But one more day. Okay. Thumbs up. Yeah, there we go. The point is, time is short. Get in there and vote in the bannies. And you just have to click on the bannies link down below in the description, and get in there and vote for these fantastic fun categories, like the most canceled sports personality, or the most canceled media, TV personality. Okay, just get in there and vote. And it takes you like 1 minute there. Yeah, thank you there Ian, for the BANNY'S link right there. So you got it right there. And then again, it's in the description down below. And it's your chance to get interactive with the Till Death Podcast Network. Let your voice be heard. Okay, do you feel like no one hears you? Are you sitting alone on your couch, just listening to the voices in your head, cleaning your guns like Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison? Well, you don't have to be that guy anymore. Okay, we care about what you have to say in the form of the BANNY'S. Get there. Okay, vote in the BANNY'S. Time is short. Get it done. Get her done. All right. And let me let you guys know about that. Hey, because I'm leaving a lot of that out there. We're gonna have a BANNY'S award show. All right, hey, let me get that back up there. The BANNY'S award show. Okay, so because we want to have you voting for awards. We're not gonna have an award show, right? So we're gonna have a BANNY'S award show. Okay, and obviously we're going to have winners of each of the categories, and we're gonna be contacting each of the winners. And you know what? They're smart. They will be, showing up to receive this prestigious award. I mean, because you can wipe your ass with the Academy Awards, the Emmys, the Tonys. They bow to the BANNY'S, okay? And so we're going to have an award show coming down here in the future, and we're going to have award presenters, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be hilarious. It's going to be a sight to behold, okay? And the winners are going to be determined by your votes, and you can get in there and you can vote as often as you like. Okay, so do it. Don't hesitate. Get in there. Do it. All right. So let's check out the live chats here. See if I'm missing out on anybody. No. Get again. Great to see you there, Darth, Jason, and I think I want to leave you guys with this. Just get out there and check out Gran Turismo. You won't be disappointed. It's a good family movie too. It's got like one F-bomb in it. It's PG-13, so they're allotted one F-bomb. And so you'd be crazy not to use your one F-bomb, right? Come on. All right. So you can't take it with you, right? You got to use your one F-bomb in there. But other than that, I mean, it's a very family-friendly film. Your family, you guys gonna be, fist bumping each other afterwards. Like, yeah, all right, and you're probably going to be, driving way too fast on the way home. And there's probably an increase in speeding tickets probably this week. To be honest, just from how pumped up everyone's, getting from this movie. All right, so. Okay, so hey, let's start wrapping it up there, people. What do you say? Yeah, let's do it because time waits for no man. I got to go see The Equalizer 3 tonight, people. Okay, so I know it's a hard job, but someone's got to do it. Got to go see it because I'm going to be giving you my spoiler-free review of The Equalizer 3 this Sunday afternoon for me. So that'll check that out. And then, of course, this show next week, a week from now, will be the spoiler warning show all about The Equalizer 3. Denzel, he's still got it. Or does he? I don't know. I'll find out later on tonight. Okay. So let's start this party off with www.moviesmerica.com. And that's where you can check out the audio-only episodes of my spoiler-free episodes of Movies Merica that comes out on Sunday. If you don't want to watch them, you can just listen to them on moviesmerica.com, or you can check them out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, yada, 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 any place that you would picture a podcast being out there for your listening pleasure, okay? And then I'm also on social media on X and Instagram. At Movies Merica is my handle. All right, that's how I handle my rig at Movies Merica on X and Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook under Movies Merica as well. You can check out my posts out there on the socials, and that's a good way to get links to my spoiler-free episodes that come on Sunday, and then this show right here. So if you're like, how do I join this live stream that I keep hearing about from all the celebrities, this Movies Merica spoiler warning? Well, hey, the easy way is just go to my X page, and click on the link for it. Okay, so all right, I think I've covered that to death. And of course, we have the tdpn.locals.com website that I touched on a little earlier. And that's where you get all our great Till Death Podcast Network content. Okay, don't hesitate for a second to go there and check all that out. In particular, I got to brag on my content here, in particular the Movies America Mad Libs, okay? And get in there and go crazy with the Movies America Mad Libs starting tomorrow morning, okay? All right. And our merch store, okay? Any great empire, like the Till Death Podcast Network, because world domination shall be ours someday, rest assured. And every great empire deserves great merch for that empire, and that's in our merch store that you can access via that link right there, or the link in the description, and get yourself some Till Death Podcast Network or any merch from any of the Till Death Podcast Network shows. You're going to get some, phone cases and keychains and shot glasses and yoga pants and whatever. You imagine it, okay? Probably not going to be able to get a nuclear reactor with Till Death Podcast Network on it, but maybe, that might be coming out next week. Fusion reactor, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, get yourself some good old merch because Kwanzaa is right around the corner, everybody. Okay, get it now. All right. And then we have at Till Death Network, solo.to/Till Death Pod Network. And that is where you can go as your one-stop shop for all links that have to do with the Till Death Podcast Network. Okay, so if you don't want to have to hunt high and low, like where's all those links for the Till Death Podcast Network, you can go to here to get all those links to anything that has to do with the Till Death Podcast Network. Okay, so get there. It's out there for you. All right. Moving on to solo.to/tildeathstudios. And this is where you can go if you want to get into the content creation game like yours truly here, or Ian or Sean, on the Till Death Podcast Network. And you want to, enhance it, give it that professional look, that polished look. Well, go to solo.to/tildeathstudios, and my man Ian, he will hook you up with all kinds of cool visual flair, all kinds of great stuff like the background that you see here, the Movies America background, or the overlay up at the very top with the tdpn.locals.com, or the great intros that you saw earlier, okay? He's going to hook you up with his immense talent if you want to go that route. So you just go to solo.to/tildeathstudios to make magic happen. All right. And moving on to solo.to/I'm Sean Cav, and that's where you can go to see all the links that have to do with my man Sean Cav. So if you don't want to, again, search high and low for any Sean Cav related links, go to solo.to/I'm Sean Cav, and you're going to get links to things like his, at least his Sipping with Sean show that he does every other Friday, going over great cocktail recipes and topics of the day from the dad perspective, and sometimes he does them from remote locations or from his bar. So definitely check out Sipping with Sean every other Friday. Okay, and if you want to know how to join that show, that's where you go. Solo.to/I'm Sean Cav. All right, hey, we're making some good progress here. We're moving right along. So we have solo.to/The Whiskey Capitalist. And that's the one-stop shop for all your links that have to do with the Whiskey Capitalist podcast show that I know a lot of you here in the audience have checked out every Monday and Wednesday evening. And that's a great show. America is watching, okay? And they're checking out Ian and Sean giving their hilarious and profound perspectives on all kinds of hot button topics of the day and politics and funnies, all kinds of great shit, and they have great guests on there. So check out the Whiskey Capitalist podcast every Monday and Wednesday night, okay? And solo.to/The Whiskey Capitalist. That's where you can go to find links to join that great show. All right. And last but not least, certainly is solo.to/Till Death Podcast, and that's where you get all the links that have to do with the Till Death Podcast that Ian and his lovely bride do on every other Saturday afternoon. And they give that hilarious, kinetic, unpredictable husband and wife. They bring that husband and wife perspective to the latest issues of the day, funny things, that kind of thing. And you haven't heard it anywhere else like they provide on that show. Okay, so do yourself a favor, get the most bang for your dollar, your entertainment dollar, by checking out the Till Death Podcast every other Saturday afternoon for me. If you're in Bangladesh, I don't know what time that would be, but you can figure it out. So that is the Till Death Podcast every other Saturday, peoples. Yes. All right. And you know what? Hey, we are getting ready to wrap it up here. But I just want to, thanks. Thanks. I want to thank Edward Havens again from the 80s Movie Podcast for joining me. And if you didn't catch it all, check out the recording of this show. And I hope to have him on here again sometime soon for more 80s talk. And again, we didn't just talk about the 80s. We just talked about, other eras of movies as well. Okay. But hey, with that, people, get out there, people. Those movies aren't got to watch themselves. See ya.
Hey, everybody! Hey! I got the police after me. They're coming after me, okay? But I got just enough time to ask you. Just like this video, if you would, and then subscribe to this channel, okay? I'm gonna be in handcuffs pretty soon. I gotta tell you. And so before they haul me off, make sure you watch these videos over here, okay? And thanks for watching this video and the Till Death Podcast Network, okay? I gotta go.